Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal Venerable. See playlist for other chapters and novels. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 1201, Multiple Stars Brilliance. Zen did not dare to underestimate these 4 taming dragon arhats. The power of the dragon scales had reached a terrifying level. An ordinary Soul Sea Realm warrior would have been torn into pieces if he was hit by that powerfully infused palm. Though Zen was leaning against the wall, his heart was filled to the brim with a competitive spirit. Both of them possessed the power of the dragon scales, but he wanted to see just who had the strongest power. The genuine dragon on the taming dragon arhat's shoulder was very remarkable indeed. It was a pity that Zen was in the illusion battlefield, for although he could use the power of his dragon scales, he could not let the cyan dragon's soul project inside. In the illusion battlefield he was unable to communicate with the cyan dragon, and in the same way, he could use the sword spirit but he was also unable to communicate with Lavender. Even if he summoned the sword spirit, Lavender's soul was not within it. Zen was fighting on his own in here, and could not consult with either the cyan dragon or Lavender, upon whose counsel he had come to rely greatly. As he thought of this, Zen did not hesitate further. The nearest taming dragon arhat was already rushing towards him, and as the arhat clapped its hands, the genuine dragon on its shoulder began to shine with a green light, and the power of dragon scales poured into the arhat statue. As Zen weaved his hands, the power of the dragon scales also surged into his body. Without the slightest intention of dodging, he also stretched out both of his palms, readying himself to face the charge. Roar! In comparison, the taming dragon arhat's 2 palms also stretched out, but were accompanied by the sound of the dragon's roar. The stone sculpture of the genuine dragon on the arhat's shoulder also raised its head and roared, adding its voice to the charge. The momentum created seemed even more formidable. In the blink of an eye, 2 sets of palms slammed into each other. Boom! Accompanied by a loud booming rumble, Zen's body was once again cast backwards upon impact. As Zen flew backwards, he felt that his blood was roiling and he also felt extremely uncomfortable. The power of the taming dragon arhat was indeed extraordinary. However, when Zen was sent flying, so was the taming dragon arhat. If the taming dragon arhat had just been an ordinary Buddha statue, Zen would surely have smashed the arhat into powder with the might of his palm strike. But the taming dragon arhat was several times stronger and fiercer than the previous sculptures that Zen had encountered. After all, the body of the taming dragon arhat had to withstand the power of the dragon scales from the genuine dragon's statue. If the arhat's body was not strong or firm enough, it might collapse before the formidable power was released into it. Zen's previous physical body too could not bear much power of the dragon scales. If he had forcefully channeled the power of the dragon scales into his body, his physical body would have collapsed first. Boom, boom, 2 loud echoes reverberated within the adytum. The sounds had been caused by Zen and the taming dragon arhat that had both crashed into the adytum's walls when they were hurled backwards. The taming dragon arhat had smashed into the wall with tremendous force. Following that huge impact of the collision, there were now numerous thick cracks zigzagging over the arhat's body, which seemed to have been unable to withstand the collision and was about to collapse. However, the golden Buddhist light began to leak out from the cracks like heavenly blood. Then the area which had been cracked was being repaired at a high rate. In an instant, the cracks closed up, and naturally the golden Buddhist light disappeared as well. This time, Zen was more seriously injured after the collision, and he was busy spitting out a mouthful of fresh blood. The arhat can recover. Seeing the reconstruction of the taming dragon arhat, Zen couldn't help but frown in disappointment. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, but didn't have the chance to think about it, because the 3 other taming dragon arhats were also striking towards him. Each of them had a genuine dragon on its body, and all of the dragon scales on the genuine dragon's bodies were flashing with light. If Zen really was beaten by the 3 taming dragon arhats, even if he didn't die in the physical world, he would still be seriously injured. Following the impact of that collision, Zen had actually beaten a retreat to a corner of the adytum. As the arhats approached, Zen once again clenched his teeth and penetrated through space to instantly bypass the 3 taming dragon arhats and materialize at another corner. This is a little troublesome, Zen thought and frowned. It wasn't that Zen didn't have a better way to deal with them. If he was unable to defeat them with his own strength, he could of course make use of other methods. When he thought of this, Zen raised his head slightly. At this moment, there were 300 celestial stars shining in the sky. These 300 stars were located in different sky regions, including the middle sky region, the western sky region, the southern sky region, the northern sky region, and the eastern sky region. Upon being summoned by Zen, they all began to emit dense and glisten starlight which immediately blazed towards the supreme world where the illusion battlefield was. Being able to trigger these 300 stars was one of Zen's achievements which he had accomplished after these past years of cultivation. Actually, Zen knew with confidence that he could deal with the 4 taming dragon arhats if he used the god's intimidating strike. However, Zen had decided to make use of the stellar body at this moment just to verify his own speculations. When the glittering starlight started to gather around Zen, he had already discovered the answer. So it really is like that. This illusion battlefield is actually not a real illusion space, but a supreme world that has originally existed in this universe. Otherwise, it might have been difficult for me to draw upon the power of the stars here. Zen mused. There were many stars in the universe that were able to add their illumination to this place. Zen could make sure of that now. The power of the stellar body was enough to have become one of Zen's trump cards, so in these 6 years, Zen had not relented on communicating with the stars. He had even spent a lot of time engaging in cultivating the stellar body. If he couldn't have made use of this cultivation method in the illusion battlefield, it would have been a great loss to him. Fortunately, Zen found that his worry was unfounded. At least, for the time being he could successfully condense the starlight and use its raw energy. After Zen's body was now coated with a layer of magnificent multicolored starlight, he once again charged straight at the taming dragon arhats. The arhat that had previously been fractured into pieces by Zen had completely recovered. At this moment, the 4 taming dragon arhats were all standing in a row, uniformly putting their palms together. Roar, 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 roar. There were 4 mighty roars of the dragons ringing out. The 4 genuine dragons on the 4 taming dragon arhats' bodies all roared at the same time. Green rays of light burst forth, making it difficult for anyone to see much of anything. How terrifying were the forces contained within their 8 palms. True to his nature, Zen didn't want to retreat or dodge. Perhaps he had other methods to deal more effectively with them, but he also knew that the illusion battlefield had just opened, and he would be facing the entire universe's ace talents. He couldn't underestimate the other Soul Sea Realm talents. Over the past few years, even Layla of the Mist Palace had grown by leaps and bounds, and Zen might not be able to beat her now. Besides, there were also many ace talents from the Blessed Buddha Land, the Thoughtless Minds, the Demon Knight, the Ogre race, and the other races in the universe. Therefore, Zen needed a test to check the fruits of his years of cultivation. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Strands of starlight began to flash into Zen's hands. The shapes of the starlight were like cottons floating into his hands. They looked weightless, but the power contained within them could not be underestimated. The 300 beams of starlight mixed together, with a great multitude of varying colors, crimson, orange, yellow, green, white, purple, blue, and red. Those gorgeous colors fused together and formed a motley rainbow of starlight, but as a result they were becoming extremely unstable. After this multicolored mass of starlight had formed, Zen immediately shot it out. If he hesitated for even 3 seconds, Zen would probably have been swept up in it too and been devoured by the might of this starlight. Multiple stars brilliance. Buzz. A deafeningly sharp sound exploded from the multicolored starlight. At this moment, the mass of starlight arrived in front of the 4 taming dragon arhats. Explode. This condensed mass of starlight contained the intense power of 300 stars. When it erupted and exploded, the different kinds of power were repelled and fused with each other. The starlight emitted was extremely powerful and shocking. The entire atom was covered in the blinding starlight, making it impossible for anyone to clearly see the situation within. However, the massive golden Buddha within the depths of the ancient temple opened his eyes and stared intently at the atom, with an indifferent expression on his great, rounded face. The golden Buddha saw that the 4 taming dragon arhats were constantly shattering, and that the stone sculptures of the 4 genuine dragons on the arhats' shoulders were also beginning to shatter. Even though the strands of golden light inside their bodies actively tried to repair their bodies, the light had immediately been destroyed by the starlight the moment it had appeared. The taming dragon arhats cannot be killed. Help me test this guy. I want to see just how much of the emotion closing godly way he has mastered. After speaking, the golden giant Buddha waved the lotus in his left hand, and with a golden flash, the taming dragon arhats, which were supposed to have been destroyed, had all recovered. Chapter 1202, Past Solemn Kalpa. The golden light of the 4 taming dragon arhats had been annihilated by the starlight. But with the interference of the giant golden Buddha, the light within their bodies grew even more resplendent. The stone statues that had been shattered previously merged together within seconds, returning to their original states. The starlight that dispersed throughout the adytum dimmed gradually. Zen's figure emerged from the shadows. When he looked at the 4 unharmed taming dragon arhats, his face revealed a look of surprise and the expression on his face turned cold. He was stunned at how strong the 4 statues of the taming dragon arhats were. This was the first time that Zen had used the multiple stars' brilliance, but he had no doubt about its enormous destructive power. It was the most explosive move in the stellar body. Such a strong attack was still unable to defeat the 4 taming dragon arhats. What happened confused Zen. He had not predicted this. He had encountered all 18 types of arhats in succession in the adytums. The strength of the arhats increased ever so slightly as he passed through the adytums one by one, but that difference was not very noteworthy. The taming dragon arhats resided in the last adytum. It was not a surprise that they were stronger. So far, Zen's methods had failed to destroy the 4 arhats. This meant trouble for him. What he did not know was that the arhats had returned to their original state only because someone had intervened in secret. The 4 taming dragon arhats did not stop moving as the dragon scales of the genuine dragons on their shoulders quivered and shone. Once again they charged toward Zen from 4 different directions. If it had been any other martial artist facing the arhats, he would have perhaps lost all hope in such a situation. However, to Zen, the trouble before him was just a trouble that he had to tackle. Facing the 4 arhats coming at him, Zen's face was inscrutable. Once again, he raised the Thunder Wind Divine Sword high in the air. The long and narrow sword had been hanging at his side. A faint sword intent lingered around the sword blade, curled like a venomous snake. It then spread forward in the air. Zen's gaze was cold as he looked at the arhats. It was as if he had become an expressionless statue at this moment. Just as he raised the Thunder Wind Divine Sword, something flickered in the eyes of the giant Buddha who was residing in the depths of the ancient temple. As I expected, the boy cultivates the emotion-closing godly way. Although his cultivation is not yet complete, he has reached his limits, for he has comprehended this cold and cruel sword intent at his soul sea realm cultivation. If he can finish the last bit of the emotion-closing godly way and comprehend the ultimate sword intent, then this sword attack will be complete. As the words of the giant golden Buddha lingered in the air, he raised the lotus in his hand. It started to spin in front of him. On the branch of the lotus flower was a fork, and on the top of the fork was a seed pod of lotus, growing side by side with the flower. The golden Buddha stretched his giant hand toward the seed pod and fished out a golden lotus seed from within. If I were to say it, all methods are an outcome of fate. The heart from the past cannot be obtained, the heart from the present cannot be possessed, the heart from the future cannot be reaped. As the golden giant Buddha chanted this mantra, the lotus seed seemed to melt into a drop of pure golden liquid that revolved in front of him. As the drop of golden liquid continued to roll, it began to take shape. A body with 4 limbs and a head. Eventually, the seed transformed into a little person whose physique was very similar to Zen's. The golden giant Buddha had used the Fate Sutra to look into Zen's fate. Such a calculation technique was a great theurgy. In comparison, the calculations of the other Supreme Lords were just child's play. However, halfway through his prediction, his enormous eyes widened even more. He was visibly surprised and a trace of displeasure could be seen on his face. After a long while, the giant golden Buddha finally opened his mouth. He is a man without destiny. How could there be a man without destiny? His prediction was halted. The golden lotus seed took the form of Zen. Its face should have been perfectly recognizable, having borrowed Zen's. However, at the moment, the face of the little golden figure seemed to be shrouded in a layer of mist. It was unable to take up a clear outline. Blast it! I want to see how long you can last. While the golden Buddha was carrying out his prediction, Zen made his move. He launched the god's intimidating strike. It was invincible. The power unleashed by the 4 taming dragon arhats was indeed impressive, but they could not stop the strike's onslaught. As this chilling attack began, a thin line appeared around the waists of the 4 arhats who had been charging straight for Zen. Puff, 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 puff. 4 muffled sounds resounded right after. Each of the 4 arhats was hacked into 2 pieces by Zen. Their heads and bodies collapsed to the ground separately. Golden light escaped from the wounds that Zen had cut open. As it flickered, a strange power was triggered from within the statues. Once again, the separated parts of their bodies bonded together. This miraculous ability was comparable to that of an indestructible body. No matter how Zen slashed them, the 4 taming dragon arhats were always able to recover. Encountering this wondrous situation, Zen's eyes were cold, but his emotions were not moved in the slightest. At the moment, Zen's heart was as chilly as ice and snow. He no longer had any thoughts, only a calm and murderous intention in his heart. He would not rest until he had killed the 4 taming dragon arhats. Puff, 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 puff. A few more muffled sounds were heard. Before the 4 arhats could get up, Zen wielded his sword once again. The sword light held a cruel sword intent that unfurled into a fan-like shape as it once again slashed at the bodies of the taming dragon arhats. Come on! Before the arhats could recover their bodies, Zen hacked with his sword once again. 1 strike, 2 strikes, 3 strikes. As Zen struck again and again, the fan-shaped sword light rolled out even more. Initially, he cut the taming dragon arhats into 2 pieces, then 4 pieces, then 8. Finally, they were sliced into a pile of rubble. If someone were to walk in on this scene, they would be unable to identify this pile of rubble. Zen had chopped the genuine dragon statues into smithereens as well. However, the cross-sections of these jagged rocks still shone with specks of golden light. Each stone quivered and shook. The next instant, they attracted each other like magnets, sticking together to restore the original taming dragon arhats. But Zen did not give them any respite. He did not stop hacking at them. He showed no mercy whatsoever. After employing the emotion-closing godly way, Zen's mind always underwent a drastic change. Unless he left this state of emotion-closing voluntarily, the 4 arhats would never recover again. Otherwise, it would be impossible for Zen to stop. The golden light on the cross-sections of the stones grew dimmer and dimmer as Zen's sword slashed down at them. The light was abnormally forceful. It could heal the wounds of the arhats right away. The golden light, in fact, was a power that came from the Buddhist scripture, past Salam Kalpa. Buddha's heart held on to the past. Therefore, after going through the tribulation of life and death, it was restored to its original state. The golden light was what caused the statues of the taming dragon arhats to return to the state they had been in before being hacked to pieces. However, the stone statue was still just a statue, after all. The golden light was not infinite. As Zen attacked it repeatedly, the golden light seemed to lose its vigor. If you still wish to recover, I will turn you all into dust. Zen's emotionless voice rang in the air as he brandished the Thunderwind Divine Sword in his hand, breaking the rocks to even smaller pieces. As the light flickered and grew weak, Zen knew that this battle was about to come to an end. Just as this hope emerged in him, the golden light in the rubble suddenly brightened. It was now 10 times more luminous than the light from before. At the same time, the broken pieces of stones vibrated strenuously, as if about to stick together once again. What? Zen realized that something was wrong. The golden light had clearly gone pale moments before. How did it get so brilliant all of a sudden? The sword in his hand did not stop. Zen looked ahead into the depths of this ancient temple and sensed that something was amiss. Had someone intervened in the fight just now? A thought rose in the mind of the golden giant Buddha. His Buddhist heart had already reached the Mahayana stage. However, as he saw Zen display such a frosty sword move so casually, he pondered on it in silence. The young boy at the Soul Sea realm seemed to execute the martial skill without using his life vitality. How was it possible? Chapter 1203, Teleportation Token. The giant golden Buddha could have just let Zen go. However, he was too curious about him to do that. This young man had relied on his own strength and went past all the 18 arhats. This was someone who was worth attention. Once Soul Sea Realm warriors opened up their soul seas, their life vitality would liquefy, turn into seawater, and get stored in their inner worlds. This way, a Soul Sea Realm warrior would be able to store huge, but still limited, life vitality in their bodies. The size of a warrior's soul sea was limited. The Golden Buddha had previously deduced that Zen would only be able to use the god's intimidating strike twice, at most. One strike would have already consumed more than half of his life vitality. A second one would dry up his entire soul sea. Despite being more talented than other people, Zen's soul sea still wouldn't be limitless. His capacity was just naturally limited. Not even a second soul sea would help him. In fact, it would only add one measly sword strike to his limit. This would mean a total of 3 strikes. It was worth noting that, in this universe, anyone who could summon the god's intimidating strike 4 times would already be considered as one of the most powerful figures amongst the major forces. Of course, Zen was someone who continuously defied conventional expectations. He hadn't used 2, or 3, not even 4 strikes. Zen Luo stood there calmly and released 17 sword strikes against his enemies. To say that the Golden Buddha was shocked was an understatement. There was just no way. This young man had just done the impossible. Did he perhaps have a treasure that could instantly replenish the life vitality in his body? Maybe he practiced some sort of magical skill that enabled him to constantly extract life vitality from somewhere. But if he had done so, the Golden Buddha would have surely noticed. Curious about how this young man managed to do this, the Golden Buddha quickly activated the golden light hidden within the 4 arhats. The Golden Buddha wasn't the first to doubt Zen like this. Gus, whom the young man had run into a few years ago, also had the same reservations. The only reason why Gus was able to go beyond his doubts was because of his faith in his master and the rigorous conditions his master required in accepting a disciple. Zen's chaotic sea, which was incomparable to the sea of life vitality, was thus quickly noticed by Gus. The Golden Buddha was perfectly aware of the existence of chaotic energy. It could be considered the energy of origin for all living beings, though, at the same time, it was also the energy of death. Chaotic energy was poison for all living things, and anyone, except perhaps a great avatar, would die with a single touch. Thus it never entered the Buddha's mind that Zen might have the chaotic sea within him. After all, he couldn't even imagine someone actually mastering or even attempting to comprehend the primal chaos technique. Meanwhile, Zen was in a state of frustration. The taming dragon arhats were quick to regenerate and he was running out of options to keep them down. His rate of chaotic energy consumption was by no means fast and he was still able to smash his opponents to pieces, but the arhats were quick to reform and regenerate by means of the golden light. Would this process of reform and regeneration ever end? One last time, he knew he couldn't give up and it wasn't in his nature to not exhaust his resources in dealing with his problems. Despite the strong force behind his strike, the stone pieces continued to reform although the cracks noticeably remained on their bodies. This time, just as they were on the verge of once again forming together, the Thunderwind Divine Sword intent flickered once more. Break now. Puff 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 puff. Zen released 10 consecutive strikes, shattering the arhats into pieces. But, just as before, the stone pieces once again glowed golden. Again, his expression dimmed, as he realized that the golden light would really drive him crazy if he didn't do something. As the golden light glowed brighter, Zen's mind was quickly doing its work trying to figure out a solution. And suddenly, as if there was a ping in his brain, Zen quickly whipped his head and gazed at the exit. There was a hidden meaning in his gaze as he zeroed in on the exit, or rather, what hid behind it. The Golden Buddha was startled upon noticing Zen's sudden change in behavior. This guy is keen and observant. He hasn't seen me but he already knows I'm here. This is the last time. If I am still unable to test your limits then I will stop, the Golden Buddha muttered to himself indifferently. Unfortunately, Zen already had too much. 8 smoky melodies. He screamed and wisps of white mist quickly spread from Zen's body. The arhats had since reformed and stood tall once again. However, no matter how strong they were, they soon realized that they couldn't get within 3 inches around Zen's body. They were well coordinated and in sync with each other but, no matter what, they just couldn't seem to catch Zen. No matter the strength of their fists and the violent nature of their attacks, they could do nothing with the way Zen dodged and easily swam through their strikes like a slimy fish in the ocean. The tables had turned and it was now the arhats who were feeling the frustration of not being able to hit Zen. Meanwhile, the young man was relaxed and floated in the air as if he was in water, merely being pushed around by the current of his opponent's attacks. He would time and again look at the Adatom's gate and sneer mockingly at whatever or whoever was there. You want to play, huh? Zen's actions left the Golden Buddha speechless, and also a bit impressed. Realizing that he was unworthy of testing this man's limits, the Golden Buddha finally pinched the incense, extinguishing the source of the 4 arhats' power. Creak. As the 4 arhats were finally rendered immobile, the gate of the 18th Adatom finally opened. Zen did not waste any time and quickly headed for the exit. He thought he would have to spend a long time playing with the arhats. He didn't expect that the person controlling them would give in that easily. He probably didn't want to make things difficult for Zen, or perhaps he had gotten bored and simply opened the door out of resignation. There was another Adatom that greeted Zen. However, there were no statues here, only a single altar in the middle. And in that altar was a white jade token that seemed to faintly glow in the light. Is this the reward? He muttered to himself, briefly looking at the token and noticing the word written on it. Teleportation, he read. It's a teleportation token. Teleportation was only something like world lords could comprehend. It was only after reaching such a high level of cultivation and experiencing how to control an entire world would a warrior be able to comprehend the methods of spatial transference. And it was for good reason. Teleportation consumed life vitality extremely fast. An ordinary world lord would have to rest and replenish his or her life vitality after around 4 to 5 teleportations. Nevertheless, it was an essential skill for world lords and above. The only way to travel through the 100,000 supreme worlds after all was through either the help of extraordinary legendary beasts or teleportation. It was through teleportation that the supreme lords were able to get to the fairy palace back then. With this teleportation token, can I teleport myself across the universe? Zen had spent 300,000 illusion points in entering this cave, so it was only natural that he had high hopes. Fortunately, he thought the teleportation token he got was an equal exchange for the loss of so many illusion points. This was something that could solve an annoying problem he currently faced. The illusion battlefield Zen was in was divided into 50 supreme worlds. If he did not want to use a passageway, then crossing a supreme world was going to be very time-consuming and exhausting for him. However, this teleportation token changed things. With this, he would now be able to travel back and forth the supreme worlds with little effort. This thought made him very excited. Zen quickly grabbed the token and took another look at the ancient temple's depths. He could feel the presence of a number of powerful individuals within the inner court, but he knew it was not in his authority to pry. After placing the token in the Sumeru space, Zen quickly turned his heel and left. As soon as he stepped out, he was suddenly transported back to the outer courtyard where the little six-winged worm flickered into existence once again, as if waiting for him. Zen couldn't help but notice the smile that had replaced the worm's earlier vicious glare. He followed it on the path towards the entrance. The spinning lights were still there, but Zen now found himself walking at ease, which was a huge difference to how tense he was when he had first entered. Just as he reached the entrance, he heard a loud noise and a bit of a scuffle. From his position, he saw numerous illusion points at the mouth of the cave and the corpses of several warriors. Chapter 1204. Getting the illusion points effortlessly. The sounds of metal weapons clanking against each other were heard. The ground shook as about 7 ogre martial artists fought against 3 celestial mice. Zen had killed 3 celestial mice when he had entered the cave before, but 3 more had appeared after. While Zen had discovered the cave a bit earlier, other martial artists came across it as well. A martial artist had probably first discovered the cave, but couldn't defeat the celestial mice. Thus, he returned to the main city and asked his companions for help. There were currently about 7 surviving martial artists left, who all saw the illusion points on the ground condense into balls and float in the air. Then, the corpses of the dead martial artists gradually disappeared. Zen counted the illusion points that turned into balls of light and estimated that there were more than 10 of them. He reckoned that the celestial mice had killed more than 10 martial artists who had been sent back to the main city to be resurrected. It was known that martial artists who killed other martial artists could absorb their fallen opponents' illusion points for themselves. However, the celestial mice didn't absorb illusion points. The martial artists released half their illusion points after they died, so the points in front of Zen didn't have an owner now. He could get these points effortlessly. There was no way he was letting them go. He moved towards the first ball of illusion points in a flash. He lightly touched them, and then his body easily absorbed the yellow illusion points. Meanwhile, the 7 ogre martial artists saw what Zen did. "How dare you? You're courting death. If you dare to absorb the illusion points of our brothers, we will chase you all the way to the ends of the earth." Their loud and furious shouts resonated throughout the wilderness, but they were still busy dealing with the 3 celestial mice. The 3 celestial mice were still moving at a weird speed. They used their sharp front teeth to bite the ogres' bodies from time to time. Their teeth, which could gnaw through the ogres' armor, could be used as divine weapons. Although the ogres had thick and rough skins, they had gotten deep wounds which even revealed some of their bones. These ogres knew that treasures were hidden in the cave. However, they had to join forces since the celestial mice were just too strong. The sky turned a tad darker, and more than 10 martial artists had been killed by now. Luckily, the celestial mice didn't absorb the illusion points. The dead martial artists were sent back to the main city by force. Then, they could just rush back to the cave and absorb their illusion points after they were revived. At that point, these ogres were extremely close and trusted each other. Therefore, none of them took the illusion points on the ground. However, a random martial artist unexpectedly appeared in the cave, and then absorbed the illusion points of their dead friends while they were engaged in a fierce battle. How could they endure that? "Your brothers." Zen's lips curled slightly when he heard their angry voices, but he didn't heed their warning. He simply continued to rush towards the clumps of illusion points and swiftly absorbed them. 3,000 points, 8,000 points, 4,000 points. Although there wasn't an extremely large amount of illusion points scattered on the ground, each one of the balls was worth a few thousand. Zen's body continuously absorbed the light spots, and the number of illusion points in his body increased rapidly. He had already acquired 50,000 illusion points by the time he had absorbed over 10 balls of illusion points. Combined with his own 10,000 illusion points, he now had over 60,000. Ah! The loud, miserable scream signaled everyone that another ogre martial artist had been killed. He suffered quite a gory death since the celestial mice had pierced through his head. Red dots of light wrapped around his soul and flew towards the main city. Then, another ball of illusion points was released and floated above his body. The remaining 6 ogre martial artists were startled at the scene and instinctively turned to look at Zen. Was Zen going to absorb those illusion points as well? If he was, it was way too much. Just as when they thought about it, Zen suddenly disappeared from where he stood. He appeared next to the corpse of the dead ogre martial artist in a second, and then absorbed all the illusion points his body released. Indeed, the remaining 6 ogre martial artists were livid at the sight of Zen. They all looked like they wanted to devour Zen alive. Kill this guy first, kill him, and then deal with the celestial mice. Dang it, he's gone too far. The 6 ogre martial artists abandoned the 3 celestial mice and focused on killing Zen first. Coincidentally, 2 of the 3 celestial mice charged at Zen at the same time. Despite the chaos, Zen's face remained stoic. It was common for all martial artists in the illusion battlefield to resort to every conceivable means, and no one could blame them. After all, they fought hard for their rankings. It was a violent competition, and only the strong would remain standing at the center of the battlefield. This was what made the illusion battlefield significant. On the other hand, white fog began to form around Zen as both the ogre martial artists and the celestial mice launched combined attacks on him. 8 smoky melodies. Once again, Zen used the 8 smoky melodies. No one could even touch Zen when he used the 8 smoky melodies, no matter how fierce his opponents were. This guy's technique is so weird. One ogre martial artist exclaimed. Let's surround him. You go over there, go behind him. However, an even stranger scene unfolded before their eyes. The celestial mice were originally quite fast, and Zen's own speed might be far from it. However, the 8 smoky melodies transformed Zen into a wisp of cyan smoke the moment the mice pounced towards him. If the wispy smoke sensed any movement, it would push Zen aside. The distance between Zen and the celestial mice had always been 3 inches. The ogre martial artists had noticed Zen's accelerated speed, which was now almost equal to that of the celestial mice. They couldn't almost see him anymore because his speed was way too fast. How would they surround him? Zen continued to display the 8 smoky melodies as he directed his chaotic energy to the ground, which formed a ring of mysterious white light. Before, he had used the Thunderbolt Annihilation to defeat the celestial mice. He did the same thing as well this time since the celestial mice had 3,000 illusion points. The only difference now was there were some ogre martial artists involved in this fight. Not long after, a terrifying aura suddenly appeared in the sky, followed by a violent bolt of lightning. Everything within the ring of white light was baptized by the heavenly tribulation. The 6 ogre martial artists let out loud unwilling shrieks before they turned into 6 red specks of light, which rushed towards the main city. The 3 celestial mice also exploded and turned into numerous illusion points. The illusion points floated in the air for a moment before they finally flew towards Zen's body. The 6 ogre martial artists got to make it until the end. They were much stronger than their clansmen who had been killed before, so they had more illusion points. Each of them had 10,000 illusion points on average. Combined with the 3 celestial mice's illusion points, Zen's illusion points had now been restored to 130,000. I'm pretty lucky, Zen said with a small smile as he floated gently and gazed into the distance. This supreme world contained countless main cities, and the illusion battlefield was divided into 50 supreme worlds. Now that he possessed the teleportation token, he no longer needed to return to that main city. Now was the time for him to frantically plunder the illusion points. However, he still had to make sure if the teleportation token was effective as he expected it to be. With that in mind, he took out the teleportation token that was forged from white jade. He then extracted a trace of chaotic energy from the chaotic sea and injected it into the token. The teleportation token released a faint white light the moment it was activated, which was then extinguished. A crease formed between Zen's brow at the strange scene. The teleportation token, is it useless? However, the teleportation token in his hand suddenly began to tremble violently within the next second. A powerful force was transmitted from within the teleportation token, and then Zen was quickly wrapped in the blazing white light. It was so bright that it was as if a small sun had risen from the wilderness. After quite a long while, the incandescent ball of white light dissipated. It was gone in a flash, and it took Zen with it from where he stood. Chapter 1205, Teleportation. After activating the teleportation token, Zen entered a mystical space. Countless red dots lay at his feet as he stood still in a daze. According to his conjecture, this teleportation token could be used to help him execute the grand teleportation technique, allowing him to traverse millions of miles away instantly and move freely within this supreme world. Never did he expect that after activating the teleportation token, he would be able to escape into such a wonderful space. It completely exceeded the scope of anyone's imagination. The red dots below should represent all the main cities of this supreme world. This is where I belong. The red dots below scattered until they were evenly distributed on the surface. Among them, one dot was cyan in color. Not far from this dot was another main city. This was where Zen arrived after entering the illusion space. Never did he imagine that he would be assigned to the outskirts of the supreme world. Just like the map indicated, the main city wasn't too far away from him. Except this area, the other cities were still a rather long way from there. Recklessly, Zen decided that if he relied on his flying speed to move forward, it would probably take him quite a bit of time to reach the neighboring main city. Can the teleportation token only be used as a map? If this token could mark the main cities but failed to teleport Zen away, then what was the point of Zen going through so much to obtain the token? The time and effort he put into it would have been for naught. With that thought, Zen carefully fumbled with the token. After a moment of drifting in this space, Zen headed straight for one of the red dots. Just as he arrived at the top of the red dot, the one below him started spinning until a white light shot out from its center. It began spinning faster and faster while releasing an intense force of the space law. This is a transmission channel. Furthermore, this channel seems to connect directly to the main city that this dot signifies. How interesting. If that's the case, won't all the main cities be free to visit? Zen's heart pounded rapidly. If this was the case, he could easily loot all the main cities of the supreme world. The space wasn't particularly large, it was only a few dozen miles wide. When Zen walked around in the space and passed a red dot, it would spread out, creating a teleportation channel, offering him a path to enter the main city. If he entered the passage, the transmission channel would disappear. A supreme world had tens of thousands of main cities, meaning that Zen had seemingly limitless choices. Wait, what are these light spots? As Zen examined the huge map below him, he discovered that there were 3 dots in the center, not too far apart from each other. They were dark green, in stark contrast to the other dots around them. When Zen flew toward these light spots, they didn't form the transmission channel, nor did they show the slightest reaction. These 3 points are also main cities. But it doesn't look like there's any way to enter them now. They must be closed off for some reason, Zen guessed. After examining the 3 dots for a while, he didn't linger too long on them. Instead, he picked out a red dot within the central area of the map. In this supreme world, the main cities close to the borderline had long distances between each other. Those cities near the center were rather close to each other, so the competition among those main cities was much more intense. Such was the reason why Zen went for this particular red dot. After choosing his target, he didn't hesitate to head straight for it. The moment he stepped into it, a transmission channel spread out from the dot, tightly wrapping around him. Buzz. The moment he passed through the transmission channel, Zen could feel some kind of tinnitus, making him extremely uncomfortable. This transmission channel was different from the usual type, after all. Normally, a transmission channel connected only 2 places, compressing the distance between them by 100 times. But a supreme world's area was far too large. Even if the distance was reduced by 100 times, it would still be too far. This teleportation token, however, was able to instantly teleport Zen to his destination, no matter how far the places were. Only masters like world lords had such capacity to exert this kind of theurgy. With the help of his teleportation token, Zen was able to manage it. But under the pressure of the space law, it was expected that Zen wouldn't get used to it easily. As the noise in his eardrums grew louder and louder, Zen suddenly dropped to the ground. Dozens of warriors sat cross-legged in the center of the main city. Every warrior participating in the illusion battlefield was fully prepared. Even their clans prepared a massive amount of supreme life vitality crystals and life vitality jades for them. In any case, this illusion battlefield was merely a projection. What they consumed was just as much of a projection instead of the real-life vitality jades outside the space. In a battle between warriors, life vitality jade was a must, but they didn't dare use up too many of them. They would face many fights on the battlefield and the warriors would leave the life vitality jades for the most crucial moments. Therefore, they often rested in the main cities to absorb vitality between heaven and earth. Buzz. With a sharp, ringing sound, a white mass of light appeared in the sky above the main city. Within this light, something dense plummeted to the ground. It was Zen, of course. Because it was his first use of the teleportation token, he had no idea where it would take him in the main city. When he reached a certain distance, he attempted to stop himself from falling, but in the end, there was an outside, invisible force that restrained him and accelerated his fall. After the white light dissipated, he realized that he had already fallen right into the heart of the city. In an instant, Zen understood why he couldn't fly. Every main city forbade warriors to exert any skills or treasures to fly. With his current strength, he had no means to get rid of the restraining force on him. Boom! The force of his fall was heavy, resounding through the whole area. When he got up from the ground, he saw that the surrounding warriors had their wide eyes fixed on him as if he were some kind of monster. Meanwhile, they also began murmuring among themselves. This guy, he fell from the sky. How is this possible? The main city forbids flying. After crossing the city walls, nobody should be able to fly. How could he fall from the sky above our city? Well, how else would you explain his appearance? The warriors whispered to each other, wearing puzzled expressions. But Zen cared nothing for those words at all. He wasn't sure if the token could be taken out and used outside the illusion battlefield, but he wasn't keen on bringing it out in front of anyone else. For now, he merely appeared in the city. He decided he would let the people guess for themselves. This is a city where human warriors gather. After examining his surroundings, Zen came to such a conclusion. This main city had the same architectural style as the human races, after all, and everyone around him seemed to be a human. But whatever the race, it wasn't important to Zen. He chose to enter the city to challenge those fat sheep and obtain their illusion points. With that thought, Zen left the central zone and prepared to try his luck outside the city. But just as he was about to step outside, a warrior called to him, "Did you just arrive in this city?" Hearing the question, Zen stopped in his steps to turn around and look the warrior in the eye. "Yes, what's wrong? We have rules in this city. Visitors have to register and surrender half of their illusion points to the city lord in order to leave safely," the warrior explained, giving Zen a careful look. "City lord? We are in the illusion battlefield. How could there be a city lord? As for my illusion points, they're inseparable. How can I just hand them over to the city lord?" The fact rather surprised Zen. "I'm not sure if the other cities have city lords," the warrior replied. "But we do. As for the payment of points, it's simple. If you let the city lord kill you once, you'll easily be surrendering half." Finally, Zen understood. He didn't know whether to laugh or to cry at the ridiculous thought. The term, city lord, still took him aback. It seemed likely that the city lord was someone like Ezra, who relied on his influence and power to squeeze out points from others, more deserving warriors. Chapter 1206, The City Lord. However, in this main city, the nefarious deed of squeezing or nipping others' illusion points was done openly and systematically. Someone had become the self-proclaimed city lord, and more than that, the lord had ordered all the martial artists in the city to submit to his or her will and laws. In fact, handing in half of their illusion points was the same as getting killed once by the city lord. The self-proclaimed lord was so brazenly arrogant to demand the term to be met. When the warrior saw Zen's outraged expression, he warned, "I advise you to obey and go register right away, otherwise you may not be able to leave this city ever again." "What do you mean, unable to leave the city?" Despite Zen's cold agitation, his interest was also piqued at the same time. If this city lord had really been milking all of the warriors in the city for their valuable illusion points, then the number of illusion points that this individual had amassed must be huge indeed. Zen could only smile at the juicy target that this had created. In confronting this city lord, it would save Zen a lot of trouble to secure a prodigious amount of illusion points in one fell swoop. Zen's grin spread even further and he looked like a cat that stole the cream. The warrior chuckled. "The city lord has already taken control of this city. If you do not register and hand over your illusion points, you will be an easy target for hordes of other warriors who will attack and kill once you leave the city. Under this situation, how do you expect to leave and survive?" Zen's eyes flashed faintly. He did love a challenge. The situation the warrior had described was only for ordinary martial artists. Since the main city was so big, even if he proved to be no match for the city lord, it wasn't difficult for him to find a random place and escape from here. Seeing Zen's disapproving expression, the warrior said, I advise you to go register on your own initiative, otherwise you might lose more than half of your illusion points. I'm afraid you will lose all of your illusion points in the end. In the end, you will have nothing but regret. Somebody had proclaimed himself the city lord, but there were many warriors who had refused to acknowledge this self-promulgated person as their leader or obey him. Those brave warriors tried to leave the city again and again, but only a very small number of them were successful. Most of the warriors who left the city were immediately attacked and killed. Then they would get revived in the main city again. These warriors were trapped in an endless cycle which culminated in despair. After repeated death, the number of illusion points the warriors had accumulated would have rapidly decreased. Where should I register? Zen smiled faintly. He had already come up with a devious plan in his mind. Over there, the warrior pointed off into the distance. After Zen nodded his head, he strolled through the main city, taking in the sights. Not long after, he saw that at the entrance of a building in the main city, there were quite a few martial artists lining up. This was the place where warriors grudgingly registered and reluctantly handed over their illusion points. Previously, Zen had handed in 300,000 illusion points to obtain the teleportation token. However, those illusions points had then been deducted by the illusion battlefield, not some selfish fop who took what was not earned. To pay illusion points here meant that martial artists had to voluntarily stretch their necks for this so-called city lord to kill them. Death was the only way to transfer illusion points. If the city lord wanted to kill Zen, he would have to do it outside the city. Thinking of this, Zen also joined the long line. The warriors queuing up all had more or less depressed looks on their faces. After all, no one in their rational mind would be willing to offer up half of their illusion points to anyone else. Certainly not without a fight. Among the warriors standing dejectedly in the line, some of them had previously refused to pay the illusion points, but they later got killed repeatedly by the subordinates of the city lord. In the end, they had no other choice but to come here to pay the illusion points. As for some warriors, they had initially left the city to explore, but after returning, they had fought against the city lord, but had been defeated and killed. After reviving, they had wanted to leave the city, but to do that they had to come here to register, so that the city lord could kill them once more before they could leave this place. The most unfortunate ones were the martial artists that had died in the wild. Some martial artists did not land in this city in the first place, but they had accidentally trespassed into the surrounding areas of this city while exploring the wilderness. As a result, they were killed by the many vicious legendary beasts which roamed in this region. According to the rules of the illusion battlefield, if any warriors died in the wilds, they would be made to revive in the nearest main city. This main city was the closest to them, so after reviving, they would automatically enter this city. Entering this main city meant that they would have to be killed by the city lord again in order to leave here safely. The reason why Zen was queuing here was not to hand over his illusion points. Illusion points were so precious, how could he give them away to others so easily? His target was the city lord of this main city. After waiting for about 5 minutes in the long line, it was finally his turn. Name: the warrior in charge of registrations called coldly. Thad Luo, Zen said faintly. Which force of the human race are you from? Which world, and which sacred place? The warrior continued to ask, barely looking up at Zen as he began to scribble with a quill on a parchment. Why do you have to know these things? Zen asked. Answer my questions. The warrior now stared coldly at Zen. The corner of Zen's mouth twitched into a faint smile when he saw the warrior's stern face. The city lord must have a strong background since he had so many warriors to serve him, otherwise there wouldn't have been so many people following him. After all, everyone was of equal status in the illusion battlefield. This reminded Zen of Ezra, whom Zen assumed must also have a strong background among the ogre race. However, Ezra had only managed to trick a small number of ogre warriors to serve him in the beginning. When many of the ogre warriors realized what was really going on, no one had followed his orders. The reason why this city lord had such a rallying power could only be due to his status outside of the illusion battlefield. The Humanity Alliance, Spirit Reading World, Spiritual Force Sacred Place, Zen replied mechanically. Hearing Zen's words, the warrior lightly sized him up, then he called another martial artist and said, okay, follow him to the outside of the city. After you've paid your illusion points, you can leave. Zen's face was expressionless as he followed the other warrior to the north gate of the main city. When he arrived at the edge of the city, Zen finally understood why the first warrior had warned him that there would be no chance for him to leave this city without permission. On the walls of the main city, at every 100 feet, stood a Soul Sea Realm warrior who was like an iron tower. These warriors were wearing black armors and wielded light golden sabers in their hands. They looked as solemn and unforgiving as graveyard statues. "Friend, where are these warriors from? Why do they wear uniforms?" Zen asked curiously. The warrior leading the way lightly glanced at Zen, disdainful of his surprised look. "What garbage! These black-armored warriors are all guards of the city lord. Isn't it normal for them to dress in uniforms? What backwater city have you crawled from?" "Normal. The city lord could even bring guards into the illusion battlefield," Zen asked in amazement. Noticing the puzzled look on Zen's face, that warrior seemed more smug and puffed up, and he even boasted of the details which he had heard. "The city lord of our main city is from one of the top 3 clans in the Thoughtless Minds, the G clan. This time, the G clan has placed great hope on the city lord to succeed in this illusion battlefield. They conscripted 10,000 top Soul Sea Realm warriors and sent them into the illusion battlefield together with the city lord. All warriors who entered the illusion battlefield would randomly be sent to different main cities, but the chances of the warriors in the same region being sent to the same place had always been quite high. The G clan had arranged for over 10,000 warriors of the Soul Sea Realm, so after being distributed to the main cities, 20% of them were allocated to other main cities. However, 80% of the warriors still followed the city lord and landed in this main city. This meant that from the moment the city lord from the G clan had entered the illusion battlefield, 8,000 warriors of the Soul Sea Realm had followed him and guarded him. It was also because of these 8,000 warriors of the Soul Sea Realm that the city lord had such great power and control. He took the main city as his own and had been further growing by taking his toll from all the lesser warriors in the city. "So that explains it," Zen nodded thoughtfully, but he was also utterly disgusted at the way in which the illusion battlefield system had been manipulated. As he was speaking, Zen and the warrior escorting him had already arrived at the city gate. Not far away was a martial artist in blue who was holding a black long sword. His eyes were closed in meditation as he was gathering his energy. Standing in front of the warrior in blue was a row of warriors at the Soul Sea Realm. These warriors of the Soul Sea Realm didn't have any intention of resisting. They just stood there lined up like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. They had no choice. They could still slowly continue to earn illusion points after paying half of their illusion points. If they didn't pay up, it would be impossible for them to leave this main city. The blue-robed martial artist stayed where he was for a long time before he suddenly opened his eyes in narrow slits. He had been gathering energy for a long time, and now that he activated the black sword in his hand with that energy, he could use it like it was an extension of his body. The radiance on the sword erupted. In the blink of an eye, the black long sword had slashed out. Puff, puff, puff. As blood splashed, 7 or 8 red dots of light wrapped around the souls of these martial artists and flew into the main city behind them where they would wait to be resurrected. In addition, the yellow light dots of their illusion points burst forth from the ground. Because these martial artists had been slain by the blue-robed martial artist, these illusion points shot directly towards the blue-clothed martial artist. It certainly saves a lot of time in accumulating illusion points this way, Zen thought. Following this line of logic, the number of illusion points which this guy had accumulated must definitely be quite significant. "Is he the city lord of this main city?" Zen asked immediately. To his surprise, the warrior who was leading the way shook his head and said, "No, he's not." Chapter 1207, Pay the illusion points. "He's not the city lord?" Zen asked in confusion. "Our city lord does not need to kill warriors to accumulate illusion points," the warrior explained. "This particular warrior is the city lord's subordinate. He helps the city lord obtain the illusion points, and then hands them over to the city lord. Naturally, the handing them over could only be achieved by the city lord killing the subordinate. This meant that the city lord had no need to personally kill the numerous warriors in the city to harvest illusion points. Instead, the city lord had this subordinate kill them, and then killed the subordinate to obtain the illusion points." As Zen realized this, he smiled ruefully. He actually felt a trace of admiration for the city lord. The city lord was only a warrior at the Soul Sea Realm. However, in such a short time, he or she had established a set of rules in the illusion space and was able to implement them layer by layer. Whoever this person was, he or she was obviously a talented person. Next batch. The blue-robed warrior brandished his black sword. His sharp, hawk-like gaze swept across the area as he calculated his next move. "Move," urged the warrior who had brought Zen here. Once you pay half of your illusion points, they won't make things difficult for you again. About 7 or 8 warriors flanked both sides of the city gates, all clearly very self-conscious. They walked toward the blue-robed warrior and let him kill them one by one, giving away half of their illusion points to him in the process. Zen was a bit depressed as he followed the warriors. His target was the city lord, not the blue-robed warrior in front of him. By doing this, the city lord must have accumulated a large number of illusion points. If Zen were to kill the city lord, he could obtain half of those illusion points as well, which was the most economical way to do it. However, he had not expected the city lord to avoid coming here personally. Instead, the city lord had sent over this particular subordinate. The blue-robed warrior glanced knowingly at the warriors. His eyes then fell on Zen. He could faintly feel the hidden aura in Zen. However, he did not take it seriously. No one in this city dared disobey the city lord, unless they planned to stay in the city forever. Surprisingly, such warriors really existed. Some people could not bear to have such a method used against them, but they could not fight the system. Thus, they stayed in the city and cursed at the city lord and his or her subordinates at every opportunity. But what was the use of it? Fighters relied on strength, not their tongues. Stand well, the blue-robed warrior said coldly. He waved the black sword in his hand in a circle and once again felt an uncomfortable feeling rise in his heart. His eyes met Zen once again, and he asked, "What is your name? Which force are you from?" "I've already been registered," Zen replied listlessly. "Answer my questions." The blue-robed warrior stared at Zen with a deep frown. "I'm from the Spiritual Force Sacred Place, Spirit Reading World, Humanity Alliance," Zen answered truthfully. "Very good," the blue-robed warrior said. "After the revival, you will come back and I will kill you once again. A total of 3 times will allow you to leave the city." 3 times, humph, even 1 time is impossible for me, Zen thought. At the warrior's words, the smile on Zen's face grew wider. But although he was smiling, his mood had indeed turned sour. This was the illusion battlefield. It enabled the warriors of the universe to enter and compete with the others. However, this group of people, relying on their power and influence, had created their own rules and were trying to control the fate of the weak. It was unacceptable. Zen's wide smile made the blue-robed warrior uneasy. "What are you laughing at?" he spat. "I'm laughing at you," Zen said abruptly. "You want my illusion points. In your dreams." Zen's words lingered for a moment, stunning the blue-robed warrior into silence. His face darkened. "You're courting death," he spluttered. As soon as he said this, he flipped the black sword in his hand and slashed it at Zen without a word. As they saw this scene in front of them, the many warriors within the city, including the one who had led Zen after the registration, widened their eyes in horror. When the illusion battlefield had opened, many warriors could hardly stand the rules set by the city lord. Some of them had tried to resist them. However, the outcome of it had been most cruel. The city lord, which was the most talented warrior from the G clan, could easily defeat a city's warriors. More importantly, the city lord had G clan's treasure, a supreme divine weapon that allowed him or her to appear and disappear anywhere without a trace. It was also because of this supreme divine weapon that almost no warrior could escape the pursuit of the city lord. In the end, they accepted their fate and obediently went to register themselves. They then paid half of their illusion points by getting themselves killed. Another one who cannot accept his fate has arrived. Alas, he will soon know better. He will accept his fate eventually. Whether inside or outside of the illusion battlefield, ordinary warriors are fated to bear the torment of the G clan. How could we possibly fight them? I suppose this boy's illusion points will all be taken away. The onlookers stared at Zen, traces of pity on their faces. Zen and the other warriors were lined up in a row. The blue-robed warrior's single sword attack had meant to hack Zen after killing the several warriors beside him. His black sword looked abnormal. As its black blade swung out, it rapidly spun as well. Because of its speedy rotation, the sword did not look like a sword, but rather like a black long stick. It was the swift rotation that caused the powerful suction force. It pulled what was in its surroundings onto the sword blade before shattering it. The warriors who had been killed by the blue-robed subordinate did not only have narrow sword marks on their bodies but also terrible wounds. Zen did not dodge this strange sword technique. Instead, he stretched his hand toward the black sword and made an attempt to grab the blade. The blue-robed warrior grinned fiendishly. The black sword spun a little faster. "Ha, the boy dares to grab my sword with his bare hand. He will know soon enough that it will only tear him to pieces," he thought. How did such a foolish boy exude that strange aura before? At the moment, the blue-robed warrior was a bit confused about Zen, but he did not take what he had sensed before seriously. A warrior's intuition was usually accurate, but not always. He wondered if he was just overreacting. However, when Zen's hand caught hold of the frantically spinning blade, the blue-robed warrior gasped in astonishment. He had thought that Zen's hand would rip open when he touched the blade. His flesh and blood should have been splattered by the blade of the sword. The bones of his arms should have been fractured inch by inch before crumbling into dust. However, the moment Zen held onto the sword, the blue-robed warrior heard the explicit sounds of collision. Clang, 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 clang. The scene he had imagined in his head did not happen. The rapidly spinning blade still spun in Zen's hand. The boy was actually holding onto the rotating blade. The sharp sounds came from the sword as it was crushed into an unidentifiable shape. It was Zen's hand that was the source of this crushing power. Finally, the sword was fully in Zen's hand. It stopped spinning as he tightened his grip. As for the blade, it had already curled up. No, the blue-robed warrior's sharp, eagle-like eyes were wide like saucers, a hint of fear in them. He had followed his young master for years and encountered many capable warriors. He had also heard of the various talents from the thoughtless minds. However, Zen was able to catch his black sword with just one hand while remaining unscathed. He had surpassed the scope of other talents. He was, quite simply, a freak of nature. On the city wall, the other warriors witnessed this scene in silence. Truthfully, they were happy to see what happened. Some of them had no choice but to serve the city lord. They had paid up their illusion points to him or her, however unwilling they might be. Their dignity did not allow them to accept these rules, but they were powerless against the G clan. Zen's display of power had helped them vent their anger, and from the looks of it, it was going to be a good show. I said you could only take my illusion points in your dreams. Zen smiled as he held the black sword between his fingers and squeezed it forcefully. Bang! A crisp sound rang out as Zen broke the black sword into two pieces. The blue-robed warrior took a deep breath. The black sword had been a secondary first-rank divine weapon and had been given to him by the city lord. The loss of a weapon in the illusion battlefield did not mean that his weapon had disintegrated in the real world as well. However, the warrior still felt a faint sense of foreboding when Zen broke the secondary first-rank divine weapon so effortlessly. Whoosh! The blue-robed warrior already had a plan in mind. He decided to steer clear of Zen for some time and rushed to the city gates. Wait up, you think you can get away with this after wanting to kill me? You can leave, but you still have to give me the illusion points. Zen said with a smile. How could he let this fat sheep escape? The warrior's illusion points could not be compared to the city lord's, but they were certainly not little in number. Chapter 1208. A girl in a purple dress. The blue-robed warrior's jaw dropped in shock at the scene in front of him. His right hand made the sign of the cross when he felt the explosive power behind him. Then 3 swords flew out of his space ring. Each sword that flew out was a different color. One was gold, then silver, and lastly, bronze. The surfaces of their blades were engraved with beautiful lines, which made their appearances more eye-catching. The city lord, who was also the young master of G clan, had given him the black sword, which Zen had twisted and broken. These 3 metal-colored swords, on the other hand, were his usual weapons. They had been with him for years and were connected to his soul. A gust of wind blew sharply as the 3 swords flew and resonated with each other. Then, their blades began to rotate rapidly. Puff, puff, puff. As the 3 swords spun around the blue-robed warrior, they formed a tricolored tornado. 3 swords spinning kill. The tornado sounded like a strong, howling wind. It was like a huge dragon that flew in the air, wanting to kill Zen. However, Zen rushed straight ahead without any hesitation like the sharpest spear. Ping, ping, ping. There were loud, metallic clanging sounds as the 3 swords hidden within the tornado clashed against his body. However scary it might seem, Zen didn't need protective armor since his physical body was like a first-rank divine weapon. Thus, his body wouldn't be hurt even if the swords were sharp. The only thing that bothered him was his own clothes. All the strangling and killing had torn Zen's cyan cotton clothes into strips and shreds. Then again, this wasn't the first time it happened to him. It was why he had to have new sets of clothes from time to time. Zen passed through the tricolored tornado by force and charged straight at the blue-robed warrior, his hands extended out like lightning. When the blue-robed warrior saw that he wouldn't be able to escape, he somersaulted like a kite and flicked out a golden ball, which suddenly shattered. Do you really think you can have my illusion points? In your dreams, my illusion points are all collected for the city lord's sake. Ha ha ha. Meanwhile, Zen was simply confused at his words. He only needed to kill this man and get half of his illusion points. Why was he saying things like Zen couldn't get the illusion points? His thoughts were disturbed when the golden ball the blue-robed warrior had crushed emitted a violent aura, which spread out in various directions. Boom! Zen judged that the situation wasn't right, so he quickly retreated to the back. He went back so fast that the distance between him and the blue-robed warrior was now over 100 feet. The golden ball shattered in just 3 seconds, and then strands of hair like blood-red lightning exploded from within it. The strands of lightning were as thin as hair, but they were dense and spread outwards like a cluster of roots. They completely enveloped the blue-robed warrior within 100 feet radius, which turned him into a giant thunder ball. The golden ball was overwhelmingly powerful that Zen's eyelids twitched wildly when he saw it. "This golden ball is too terrifying," he exclaimed. Had Zen been involved in, the terrifying blood-colored lightning might have torn him to shreds by now. While death in the illusion battlefield didn't mean he'd actually die in the outside world, he would have lost half of his illusion points after his death. Now, if this fight had happened outside the illusion battlefield, then he would probably be killed for real. Aside from the coldness in Zen's heart, he also thought about what the blue-robed warrior said before he died. "Why can't I get his illusion points?" he murmured. According to the rules of the illusion battlefield, the blue-robed warrior would still lose half of his illusion points even if he killed himself, just like the warriors who had been killed by the celestial mice in the wilderness. The illusion points would then turn into a yellow light ball, and all Zen had to do was absorb it. After the blue-robed warrior died, a large amount of illusion points indeed appeared where he was. The densely packed illusion points were so many that they were twice the amount Zen had obtained from when he killed Lane. This meant that there were at least 200,000 illusion points within the blue-robed warrior's body. However, something strange happened. After the yellow spots appeared, they didn't enter Zen's body. It was because he did not kill the blue-robed warrior. Not only that, but the illusion points flew away and were headed towards the city. What's going on? Zen was truly shocked. This wasn't in the rules that he knew. Could it be that the city lord could change the rules of the illusion battlefield? This was impossible. In addition, the guards on top of the city walls didn't even move when they saw that the blue-robed warrior was dead. It was clear that even the blue-robed warrior was no match for Zen, so the guards would only be giving Zen illusion points if they rushed out of the city. However, there was a mocking smile that hung on each of their faces as they stared at Zen, as if patronizing his childishness. The many warriors at the city's entrance all had different expressions. They had surrendered to the city lord and naturally wouldn't tell Zen the reason. Dust fell off Zen's feet as he floated 10 feet above the ground, his face grim as he watched the scene. He felt somewhat helpless when he saw the massive amount of illusion points disappear. Suddenly, Zen's eyes flashed sharply as he flew along the wall. The so-called city lord had more than one subordinate. Since the city was too big, the news of him killing the blue-robed warrior might not spread. Thus, Zen now looked for his next target, the city lord's another subordinate. After the heavy cluster of yellow light spots floated away and finally entered the city, they flew into a house in the southwest part of the city. All the warriors in the illusion battlefield fought with all their might and used every method available for the illusion points, whether it was fighting other warriors or killing all kinds of beasts in the wilderness. However, this house appeared to be quite peaceful. A few snowflakes, like weightless cotton, gently rained down upon it. But since it was scorching hot, the snowflakes were naturally man-made. There was clearly something up with the place. In fact, Zen had felt the chill in the air when he was near the house's entrance. Even ordinary warriors knew that it wasn't a good place to stay, so they had all retreated. There was a thick layer of snow on the ground within the courtyard of the house. With its serene atmosphere, standing in the middle of it felt like it was in the middle of winter. A woman in a long, purple dress was sitting in one corner of the snow-covered courtyard, a silk book in the palm of her hand. The silk book did not have any pictures drawn on it. Instead, it was filled with small words. It was actually a novel. Warriors were in an absolute ruling position in the 100,000 supreme worlds of the entire universe. To put it bluntly, everyone paid great importance to cultivation. They didn't care about literature at all. Scholars were in the lower class even among mortals. They were insignificant beings that did not exist in the mainstream culture of any race. However, the past few years saw the upper world bustle with novels. It wasn't because the status of the scholars had been elevated. Poems, songs, and the like were not popular among the warriors. However, all kinds of novels were popular. The reason behind it was still Zen. Although many warriors were annoyed when he had told stories to the mysterious woman with his roaring token, some still listened and became interested. However, Zen still had to cultivate, so he had little time to tell stories. Besides, he told stories because of the mysterious woman. The other warriors would gather and listen to the stories when the mysterious woman came out of seclusion, but when she hid, Zen wouldn't tell any tales at all. There were many warriors in the universe, but even more mortals, who were more culturally inclined than the warriors. The warriors soon found that spending a life vitality crystal was enough to buy countless novels. They could even hire hundreds of storytellers to tell stories every day. It had become the most fashionable thing among them in the last few years. Because of this, the status of some mortals rose greatly. For example, a storyteller emerged in a small city under the command of a 6th-grade sacred place of the thoughtless minds. All the stories he told were written by himself. He was very good at his storytelling, whatever his mood or demeanor was. A warrior in the sacred place admired him, so his status rose bit by bit when he was introduced. It was even said that he caused 2 sacred places to fight over him. Later on, a warrior even gave the storyteller a pill, which gave him an extra few hundred years of lifespan. This was already very shocking among mortals, as even some of the small countries' kings would not receive such treatment. But all in all, the elevated status of the scholars was all thanks to one person, and that was Zen. If it weren't for the fact that he used the roaring token to tell the mysterious woman stories and caught the interest of some warriors, there wouldn't be such a trend. Chapter 1209, Norton. She was pretty comfortable in her chair, feet propped up by a small stool as she read the silk book with relish. It was the latest novel of a popular series that she religiously followed. To say that she was a fan of popular novels was an understatement. As a Soul Sea Realm warrior, memorizing and retaining all the information in this silk book was very simple. All she would need to do was to use her full perception to engrave the words in her mind. But where was the fun in that? That was hardly a pleasurable way of reading. No, to make sure that she truly grasped the plot and fell in love with the characters, she needed to read these novels word for word. There was just this thrill of suspense in everyone's slowly unfolding fates page by page. Just as she was about to get to the good part, a large mass of yellow illusion points flew into her room and towards her. The woman frowned as she absorbed the illusion points. What happened? She muttered in annoyance. It greatly displeased her to be disturbed at the most intriguing part of the story. Who killed my man? You will regret it. She carefully folded the corner of the page, marking the part where she left off before carefully packing it into her Sumeru space. She then quickly left the comfort of her chair and headed outside. It was cold, but her small, dainty footprints left a rather enchanting sight on the white powdery snow. Meanwhile, Zen was quickly advancing along the city walls. He was right, the city lord did have more than one subordinate. All in all, she had a total of 8 people who helped her collect illusion points at each city entrance. These 8 people had been her personal bodyguards in the outside world. It was only natural that they remained her subordinates here. These 8 guards were perfectly willing to hand over their accumulated points to her here in the illusion battlefield. These warriors had a less than amicable reputation in the city. They were nicknamed butchers, due to their cruelty and often questionable methods of collecting illusion points from other warriors. Zen's speed meant it only took him a few minutes to reach the other side of the main city. There was a tall human warrior that stood in front of the city gate. He had an air of intimidation to him, especially with the forbidding golden hammers he held in each hand. The warrior opened his mouth and projected his clear, loud voice, "Stand still. If you all cooperate, then I'll be able to finish you with just one slam of my hammer. You won't feel any pain, and the next thing you'll know, you've already been resurrected back in the city." There was a line of warriors in front of him getting ready to give half of their accumulated illusion points. Zen's eyes flashed with excitement. Drawing a wisp of chaotic energy, he quickly summoned a strong wind that carried him forward. Combined with his already fast speed, he was a mere blur in the eyes of an ordinary warrior. Just as this supposed gatekeeper was about to lift his hammer, he suddenly felt a powerful aura headed towards him. His eyes widened in surprise and a big smile appeared on his face. "You're really looking for trouble? Come at me, you brat." Norton, this tall gatekeeper declared with maddened frenzy. He was a very aggressive person, and the illusion battlefield was the perfect place for him to let out all his pent-up rage to everyone. It was a pity he couldn't freely go around on a rampage because he had to help his master collect illusion points. Norton wasn't really interested in being a gatekeeper and slaughtering these docile warriors. It was really just master's orders. But the appearance of a challenger invigorated him. Back when the illusion battlefield was just starting, there had been a lot of people who came to challenge him to fights. This quickly changed, however, when his expertise became known. There remained a few warriors stronger than him, but all of them quickly became docile underlings after being taught a lesson or two by his master. Of course, there was no pleasure in killing a docile lamb who willingly offered itself up for slaughter, which was why he was ecstatic by Zen's sudden appearance. Clang! There was a loud, ringing noise as he struck his two hammers together aggressively. A visible wave burst forth from the hammers, and the sound waves from the strike rang through everyone's ears and made their souls tremble. It wasn't just Norden though, even Zen felt a bit of an adrenaline rush upon seeing that his opponent was not afraid to face him. He only hoped that Norden wouldn't escape into the main city in the middle of the battle and use the golden pill. He wouldn't want his efforts to be in vain. I have to kill him as fast as possible, Zen thought to himself. He quickly plotted his attacks as he rushed towards his opponent. When he was a mere 100 feet away, Zen quickly hid into the void and got ready to close the distance with a single leap. His plan was to get close enough to deal the killing blow, giving his opponent no opportunity to launch a counterattack. However, just as Zen did this, he heard a loud snort from Norden, who suddenly brandished his golden hammers and smashed them towards the void. Boom! There was a loud booming crash as the hammers forced Zen out of the void. He staggered back and could only look at Norden in surprise. Strangely, even Norden was shocked. Zen's current comprehension of the space law allowed him to hide in the void effectively, which was perfect in avoiding his enemy's attention. However, Norden not only saw him use this skill but also managed to kick him out of the void with his hammers. The power of the hammer's strike caused his blood to churn inside him. He found himself needing to take a deep breath to counteract the effects of Norden's attack on his body. However, as mentioned before, Norden was just as equally shocked as Zen. His hammers did reach and smash into Zen's body, but the force he released was enough to raise an entire mountain to the ground. A Soul Sea Realm warrior could never hope to survive that single strike from him. He expected Zen to have turned into meat paste by now. So why was he still standing in front of him, dazed but still clearly unyielding? Who was this guy? How in the world did he survive my hammers? Norden couldn't help but ask himself. A feeling quickly arose within him. It felt as if what he currently faced wasn't a mere human but a terrifying monster, and he knew that his hammers would be no good against a monster. Even his master wouldn't be able to withstand a head-on strike from him, but this guy. However, unlike the blue-clothed warrior, Norden was not deterred. Instead, he became even more excited at the prospect of facing an extremely powerful opponent. These types of fights only came by chance. Besides, he couldn't really die here on the illusion battlefield. Fighting against such a strong warrior was so rare to him nowadays, so he might as well take advantage of this opportunity. He was in desperate need of a good fight. He could collect the illusion points later after their match's conclusion. I really envy your strong body. Too bad I'll be smashing it with my next attack. Don't be a coward and take it like a man. Norden roared with blind fury. Clang! There was another loud ringing sound as Norden smashed his hammers together and released powerful waves in the air. As he did this, he quickly charged towards Zen by moving his sturdy legs in a rather mysterious manner. As he charged, Norden waved his arms like crazy and formed numerous hammer shadows that served to protect him. His movements were so fast and erratic that not even Zen was able to see through him. It was reminiscent of a mad bull that thought of nothing but death and destruction as he blasted through everything and everyone. Such display of fierceness quickly caught the attention of the other warriors who were initially waiting in line. Norden's hammers were intimidating, but not so much when it wasn't being directed at them. Oh man, that dude's going to get it. Norden's attacks can't be dodged. Norden's hammers will probably scare the trash out of him. Those things are enough to smash him into meat paste. You know, I heard something interesting. Once, when he got angry with the city lord, Norden smashed his hammers onto the walls and shook the entire city. Of course, this was a gross exaggeration. All the main cities in the illusion battlefield were created by the heavens and were an incarnation of heaven's rules. It was impossible to shake their walls. Still, it was a nice embellishment to the tales of Norden's great strength. However, Zen remained calm and collected, just as always. This strong opponent was only one of the many other strong opponents he had faced in his lifetime. The young man stood still on his spot, but his power was currently circulating through his body and surging towards his arms. He looked up and locked gazes with an approaching Norden and his protective hammer shadows, ready for a fight. Chapter 12:10. The Falling Snow. The golden hammer shadows in front of Zen belonged to a mysterious hammer technique with thousands of years of history behind it. As the moments passed by, more and more golden hammer shadows appeared out of nowhere, making it impossible for anyone to tell if they were real or fake. It was, without a doubt, not an easy feat to break them. Hopeless as it might seem, Zen had no intention of breaking through them. He was more inclined to employing the brute force to fight back. And that was the most efficient method rather than taking a sneaky way out. It was widely known that Norton's strength was extraordinary. Everyone presumed that no warriors sharing the same level as him could match up to him just with brute force. Even for the city lord herself that Norton had served for years, she was certainly stronger than Norton, but her brute strength was not up to par with that of him. Therefore, to fight Norton in this way only meant giving in to a resounding defeat. Zen, on the other hand, would not be put at a disadvantage, since he had the power of dragon scales and the divine weapon body. Even a powerful warrior, who had a much higher cultivation level than him, would be in a vulnerable state, let alone those warriors who were also at the same level as him. These strapping attributes of Norton made Zen not to retreat a single step. Instead, he shifted towards Norton. "You have some nerve, I'll kill you in an instant." Norton growled under his breath as he watched Zen rushing towards him instead of running away. Bracing himself, he then poured all his strength into his arms. Moments after, the soul sea in his body began to stir up monstrous waves as his immense power spread out, ready for a kill. He was like a god of strength, summoning all the golden hammer shadows to descend upon Zen. In contrast, for a split second, Zen had also activated the power of up to 10,000 dragon scales. The supreme power within his body was like a chaotic tidal wave as it surged forth. Although the hammer shadows were like a myriad of blossoming flowers that dazzled his eyes, making it hard for him to figure out whether they were real or fake, Zen did not plan to resist the hammer blows. His main target was Norton. Whoosh! Seemingly like in a fashion of throwing caution to the wind, Zen's body movement suddenly gathered momentum as he formed a barging fist with one hand. It only looked like a random punch, but the power contained within it far exceeded anyone's imagination. From Norton's point of view, Zen was nothing but someone putting his life on the line in this kind of battle. Norton laughed heartily as his right hand made a grasping motion, making the golden hammer shadows that crowded the sky quickly reduced by half. He fully knew that Zen was extraordinary based on their previous encounter, where he hit him hard with his hammers. In his anticipation to block Zen's attack, he positioned a large golden hammer on his chest. The barging fist that Zen swiftly set in motion looked starkly simple, but Norton was deathly afraid that he would play tricks on him. He didn't want to die together with Zen. What if they both perished side by side? Then half of his and Zen's illusion points would be left in this place. Chances were that they would be taken away by some other meddlesome warriors. And in the worst-case scenario, he would receive a terrible scolding from his young master. Norton might look reckless, but on the contrary, he was meticulous. He carefully withdrew one of the enormous golden hammers and transformed the other one immediately into an army of hammer shadows. Aiming them directly towards Zen, he entertained the notion that this hammer strike was going to smash Zen's head into pieces. Anyone could say that Norton had made the most accurate judgment in a heartbeat. However, no matter how accurate and flawless his judgment was, it was still rendered useless under the suppression of Zen's absolute strength. When Zen's punch landed on Norton's defensive golden hammer, the latter immediately understood something. The force behind Zen's punch was barely strong, and even Zen's entire aura had been engulfed and concealed by Norton, but when his barging fist had come in contact with the golden hammer, Norton could only feel an overwhelming force emanating from it. And like a ripple effect, the force of his fist hit the golden hammer, and the golden hammer subsequently hit Norton's chest. Crack! A loud cracking sound soon reverberated. The circular golden hammer was punctured up in the middle by Zen. Zen's barging fist did not stop there. It slid through the crack and hit Norton's chest. Clang! Just as Zen's fist was about to land on Norton's chest, another loud sound rang out. Zen's gaze flickered when he heard this sound, but he secretly sighed in his heart, noting that Norton had a precious treasure to defend himself. A defensive treasure that could support the power of 10,000 dragon scales was at least a first-rank divine weapon. However, even if a precious treasure protected his chest, Norton would still be heavily injured, and that was inevitable. The precious treasure could only mitigate the injuries he would sustain. Unless it was a supreme divine weapon, it could not completely defend him against the attack. Zen was more worried about Norton possessing a golden pill. It was clear as day that all his previous undertakings would go down the drain if Norton happened to attempt to squish a golden pill and kill himself. Norton was thrown backward by the compelling brute force. He knew he was seriously injured as he could feel the immense pressure still lingering in his internal organs. It also shook his inner world, causing his soul sea to collapse. At this point, Norton wasn't thinking about protecting his own life, but he was in dire need of keeping his young master's illusion points. He could be resurrected if he lost his life, but if Zen took his illusion points, then what he would face was probably the young master's harsh punishment. For this reason, the moment Norden was sent flying backward, a golden pill abruptly appeared in his hand. But before his palm could touch the golden pill, he heard a sneer. With his quick thinking, coupled with his agile movement, Zen had managed to get close to Norden. He had anticipated that Norden would put the golden pill into use. But Norden's sudden attempt to smash it turned futile as a sudden streak of blue light flashed. Shock engulfed him as Norden felt a numbing dull ache at his right hand. His hand had been cut off in an instant by Zen's Thunder Wind Divine Sword as Zen flew high into the air with the golden pill in his hand. Zen's movements were neat and swift. His body flashed as he snatched the golden pill out of Norden's severed hand. Then with a tumble, his knee was pressed against Norden's chest, while he aimed the edge of his sword at him. "My young master won't." Puff. Zen didn't let Norden finish his words. If they stayed somewhere else, he would have listened to what he was about to say. This city was mysteriously strange in an odd way. And he was kind of afraid that the illusion points would suddenly fly away. Thus he thought he should kill Norden first. He just intended to get Norden's illusion points, not wanting them to take off in the air. Until now, Zen still couldn't fathom why the illusion points would automatically fly out after the warrior in the blue clothes died. And as soon as Norden died, before he was brought back to the city to revive, he was slowly wrapped up by a red light dot, while at the same time, a large number of illusion points exploded. As expected of him, Norden had much more illusion points than the warrior in the blue clothes. A crowd of yellow dots of light burst out from Norden's body and flew towards Zen. Witnessing all this, Zen let out a sigh of relief. He thought that there was someone who could influence the rules of the illusion battlefield. It seemed he was wrong now. Back on the city walls, after the warriors had keenly observed the whole scene, most of them were filled with envy and pity. They envied Zen because he possessed such strength. Not only did he succeed in resisting Norden, but he even killed him in one blow and obtained so many illusion points. The reason they felt pity for Zen was that they knew very well what kind of miserable thing would happen to him after this. In the past, when the city lord was attempting to take control of the city, series of revolts from many warriors had happened. Some of them were more powerful than Norden and the others, while some had even killed Norden a few times. But in the end, they were slaughtered time and time again by the city lord. No one would be able to escape her wrath. Now, not only did those warriors have few illusion points, but leaving the main city was seriously tough and tricky for them. If they happened to succeed in getting out of the city alive, they would be hunted down by the city lord and her subordinates without recourse. This city lord had a superb ability to move at an insanely high speed. Thus, no Soul Sea Realm warrior could get rid of her without that much difficulty. From the way they looked and weighed this, Zen's life would have a grim ending. After Norden dies, the city lord would come over. This guy doesn't leave yet. If he runs away now, he would be able to escape the city lord's attack. This warrior must be a warrior who came from another city and is not aware of the city lord's strength. What they all didn't know was that Zen had no plan of leaving this place at all. He was targeting the infamous city lord. Those several subordinates of this city lord had already got a lot of illusion points, so to speak, the number of illusion points accumulated by this city lord might be significantly huge. Thinking about this, how could Zen possibly be willing to leave? Since Zen had killed 2 of her men, the city lord, who was so overbearing, would probably come to attack him very soon. And this was all Zen wanted. Zen stood still outside the city. His gaze focused solely on the golden pill in his hand. This golden pill was most likely a supreme treasure, since its power was so terrifying. Fortunately, this was good for one-time use. Still, if a warrior released the golden pill in the face of an enemy, it would have a miraculous effect. But this golden pill needed to be crushed before it could be activated. Could it be that this golden pill could only be used to commit suicide? While he was keen at observing the golden pellet, Zen suddenly felt that it was heating up. He could tell that there was a formidable power surging within. Sensing that it would explode, he almost reflexively tossed the golden pellet far away. Puff! After the golden pellet hovered over 100 feet in the air, a dense mass of blood-red lightning was emitted from it. Zen was stunned by encountering this scene. If it weren't for his quick reaction, he probably would have been caught up in the lightning as well. Zen felt a chill coming from behind him. When he turned his head, he saw a woman. She was dressed in purple clothes, and slowly making her way towards him, with snow falling silently and trailing behind her. Chapter 1211, Lucille G. The woman was wearing a purple silk robe with exquisite embroidery. The ivory-white ribbon which decorated her long ebony-colored hair slowly fluttered behind her like a banderole from a masthead, making her look like a fairy from a painting. She walked daintily in her crescent-shaped embroidered shoes and explored around the edge of the city wall. With every step she took, a step formed by ice was created on the ground, and these supported her light footsteps, permitting her to float forward a distance. The icy steps shattered with a loud bang once she had stepped off from these frozen perches, so every light step she took was accompanied by the clear and melodious sound of ice shattering. Crack, splash. Zen's eyes were calm as he looked at the purple-clothed woman. However, he was on guard, and his forelimbs quietly spread out in preparation for anything. Cultivation was a standard that measured a warrior's strength. But, in the upper world, this standard was no longer the most accurate. For example, a powerful warrior at the Soul Sea realm could be far stronger than a normal warrior at the Spirit Supreme realm. Zen had personally killed Spirit Supreme realm warriors before, and this situation had not only existed for him. Many powerful warriors throughout the universe, as well as the ace talents of various races, could do the same. Cultivation had therefore become somewhat of a moot point now. When Zen felt this woman's cold and sharp aura, he also felt that her strength was prodigious. She might even be the strongest warrior he had encountered since he entered the illusion battlefield. The city lord is here. Is this woman the lord of this city? She is so beautiful and innocent looking, like a fairy. Why would it be strange that a girl from the G clan is so beautiful and looks like a fairy? The onlookers discussed it among themselves. On top of the city wall, many warriors were enraptured by this woman's appearance, and their eyes began to shine with a radiant light. Only a perfect object could cause these glowing expressions to populate the faces of the warriors. The woman in front of them was indeed perfect. Zen's eyes followed suit and also glowed in admiration. In terms of appearance and demeanor, Lavender was probably the only one who could compare to this perfect woman. However, her temperament was completely different from Lavender's. Lavender radiated a feeling of supreme nobility, as if she was a goddess which had descended upon this world. Moreover, with every movement, Lavender would reveal resolution and killing intent. A fiery heart was hidden within, under her ice-cold exterior, just like a frozen volcano waiting to erupt. The woman in front of him, on the other hand, was wrapped in an aura of serenity and peace. Just like the falling snowflakes, her cold aura didn't make people want to resist her, but made them calm. However, Zen could feel that there was a faint killing intent hidden just beneath the frosted facade. This killing intent was extremely arrogant, as if she had earned the confidence to kill and take the lives of all living beings. And those living beings naturally included him. The purple-clothed siren was drawing closer and closer to Zen. The coldness which emanated from her was gaining intensity, and the snowflakes falling from the sky were also increasing in size. All of the warriors, both inside and outside the city walls, shut their mouths, and only the patter of snowflakes falling on the ground could be heard. The temperature of the illusion battlefield wasn't low, and could be said to be scorching hot for mortals. However, these snowflakes didn't melt, they were piling up at a visible rate and soon covered the whole ground in a thin layer like icing on a cake. You killed Ethan. The purple-clothed woman's gaze landed on Zen as she moved through the drifting snowflakes. Like her temperament, this woman's gaze was especially pure and penetrating. Zen felt as if she were looking right into his heart, reading his feelings and thoughts like reading a book. Who is Ethan? Zen asked with a smile and raised his head to look at the woman. Are you referring to that blue-robed warrior? The purple-clothed lady nodded. Yes, sort of. Zen did not deny it. He pointed to the spot where the golden pill had exploded and said, but he could also have been considered to have committed suicide. On the downside, I didn't get his illusion points. That blue-robed warrior had in the end committed suicide, yet his illusion points had been absorbed by someone else. Until now, Zen hadn't been able to figure it out. This was simply inconsistent with the rules of the illusion battlefield. Those illusion points were naturally absorbed by me, since they were rightfully mine, the purple-clothed woman said indifferently. How did you do it? Zen was most curious about this. The woman did not show any intention of answering Zen's question. Instead, she continued to examine him with her pure eyes. You even killed Norton. Hearing this, Zen was also a bit speechless. Obviously, this woman wanted to ask something that could have been phrased in a single question. Yet she worked up to her goal as she asked him twice. He just grinned and said, yes, I did kill him. You're the city lord, right? Were these two your men? Zen's words carried a clear tone of provocation. Although he had responded by going on alert when he saw this opponent, he was not afraid of battle. The purple-clothed woman did not respond to Zen's question. She did not seem to take any notice of what he said, but instead completely immersed herself in her own thoughts. Finally, she pronounced, "You have taken half of Norton's illusion points. I have to kill you 3 times to earn those total back. After I kill you 3 times, I can let you leave the city." When he heard these strange words again, Zen then understood that it was impossible to communicate with this girl. But this did not affect Zen's goal. From the looks of it, this woman was indeed the city lord. Killing her to take away her illusion points was Zen's only goal. Whoosh! The Thunder Wind Divine Sword suddenly appeared in Zen's hand, while a glimmer of light appeared on the blue blade of the sword. Zen restrained his emotions and held his sword vertically across his chest in salute. "If you can defeat me, then do it. Even 30 times is okay." The purple-clothed woman glanced searchingly at Zen's long sword. Although she didn't know the origins of the Thunder Wind Divine Sword, she knew that this sword was not ordinary. A sliver of surprise appeared in her clear eyes. "The sword is interesting. What's your name?" the purple-clothed woman suddenly asked. "Thad Luo," said Zen. The woman's face revealed a trace of disappointment when she heard Zen's name. The number of warriors in the illusion battlefield might have reached 1 trillion by now, and there might even be millions or even tens of millions of warriors with the surname Luo. Alas, it's so hard to meet that guy, the woman thought bitterly. Immediately, she sighed and released a steaming breath into the cold air. When she thought about the ends of the stories that Zen hadn't revealed, her cold heart burned with passion. If he has entered the illusion battlefield, he would definitely not be some nameless person. I should be able to find him. As for this man before her, since he had gone against the rules she had set, she would naturally kill him and reap his illusion points. "Don't call me the city lord," the purple-dressed woman said, as she slightly spread out her slender fingers, which were as fair as the falling snow. Soon after, a rippling light wrapped around her fingers, weaving in amongst the digits. After the light had dissipated, 5 rings appeared on her fingers. The 5 rings were old and had no decorative design to them. Their ancient design did not match with the temperament of the woman. There were also thin chains which linked the 5 rings. She suddenly stretched out her slender fingers, causing the chains to softly clank against each other as the links began to move. Only then did she say, "My name is Lucille G. Remember my name, and go to perdition." The moment she finished speaking, the snowflakes that had slowly been falling around her suddenly increased in speed by more than 10 times. It had been the type of snow that would have quietly fallen on winter nights, but now it became an epic snowstorm in the middle of winter. Hoo, hoo, hoo. Not only did the snowflakes get bigger, but the wind also picked up and became stronger. In the midst of the swirling snowstorm, Lucille G's body suddenly flew towards Zen. Whoosh! When she was slowly strolling through the snow, she was an elegant lady. But once she moved onto the battlefield, she became like a bolt of lightning, not at all inferior to a man. In the blink of an eye, the distance between her and Zen had narrowed to less than 10 feet. Zen's long sword also suddenly rang out. Nether God Shadows. Whoosh! Crack! As Zen infused his chaotic energy into the Thunder Wind Divine Sword, a twisting bolt of lightning shot out towards the woman with a sharp electric crackle. This lightning was followed by a sharp wind blade. After the wind blade, there came numerous Nether God Shadows, each of which displayed a different fist technique in attacking Lucille G. On top of the city wall, all of the warriors were fixedly staring at the scene before them. They almost held their breaths in anticipation of what they believed was an inevitable outcome. Many of the warriors in the city had witnessed or even experienced Lucille G's strength at first hand, so they didn't dare to cross over the city wall by even half an inch. This was because they clearly understood that only the rules of the city could protect them. Why do I feel that it's not fair? Has the city lord suddenly become generous, since she only plans to kill this brat 3 times before letting him go? The city lord's personality has always been very contrary. She is temperamental, and I've heard that it has something to do with the books she's reading. She seems to be easily influenced by the stories in the books. Sometimes gentle, sometimes brutal. I find this personality type very attractive. Attractive, she is an ace talent of the G clan. Do you think you can hold a candle to her? This battle had just begun, and many warriors were also taking advantage of this opportunity to discuss it in whispers. Chapter 12:12, A Giant. Zen's first round of attacks was merely a trial run. Still, that didn't make it something that could be taken down so easily. Under the full force of the Thunder Wind Divine Sword, regardless of whether it was the lightning or the wind blade, it was extremely sharp. Under Zen's control, the Nether God Shadows were all in different styles but all gave meticulous punches and kicks. For his opponent, it was no simple task to deal with the Nether God Shadows. During the 3 waves of attacks, Lucille's clear eyes were clouded. At this moment, she made a gesture, pressing the tips of her thumb and forefinger together, keeping the other 3 fingers raised. Her slender pinky was the most prominent, while the ring it wore emitted a faint, yellow light. Earth protection, Lucille said softly. The yellow light gradually condensed and formed the shape of a giant. It stood thousands of feet tall, enveloping Lucille within. The light brought along a heavy aura. Boom! The lightning emitted by Zen struck the yellow light heavily, leaving only a faint, charred mark before disappearing in the blink of an eye. As for the wind blade, it could only cut through an inch. Although the Nether God Shadow's fist techniques were undoubtedly exquisite with flawless coordination, they were unable to break through the powerful defense. It was even harder to reach Lucille as she stayed within the giant. Such strong defense, Zen said with a raised eyebrow. Although he knew that the 5 rings on Lucille's hand were extraordinary, their true power exceeded his imagination. And at that point, she had only activated 1 ring. After blocking Zen's attacks, Lucille raised her palm toward him. With the corner of her mouth slightly curled up, she smashed her palm down. The action triggered the giant to do the same, it smashed straight down on Zen. Boom! An earth-shattering sound resounded. Vibrations rippled out from the impact. If warriors witnessed the scene from above, they would see a gigantic palm print on the empty space next to the city. Surrounding it were countless cracks, rapidly spreading out and expanding. The surrounding earth continued to shake. When the giant palm landed, Zen flew backward, barely dodging it. As he looked at the palm print on the ground, the gravity of the situation grew clearer in Zen's eyes. But his fighting spirit began boiling up just as much. His most important goal after he had ascended to the upper world was finding Yan. But he had never forgotten to pursue his own cultivation and surpass his own limits. Since he had stepped into the upper world, he hadn't been able to fight anyone of the same cultivation level as him. But in the illusion battlefield, he managed to complete his long-cherished wish. He would face the talents from different races in the whole universe and the ace talents of various races. Isn't that too exaggerated? Humph. Do you think anyone can be called the ace talent? Even a great force won't necessarily have many ace talents. A warrior like her will no doubt become outstanding among the world lords after becoming one. If she becomes a supreme lord, she would be a top ranker. As the world of chaos has begun, all the races have poured their resources into the ace talents of their own race. These ace talents are the hopes of the big clans and races. That also widens the gap between them and the other Soul Sea Realm warriors. Warriors like us will never stand out. Hundreds of thousands of warriors had already gathered on top of the city walls. The loud sound drew most of their attention. Although Lucille's palm had shaken the earth for hundreds of miles, the cracks on the ground extending as far, the city beside them remained unmoved. Only sound was transmitted from the palm. Missing her target, she raised her hand, ready to strike again. The first palm strike was from the top down, covering the entire area. The second palm strike was like a slap across the face as her palm made a wide, sweeping motion. The swing wasn't dramatically fast. The giant stood countless times larger than Lucille, and swung its arm just as fast as she did. So the strike was still undoubtedly overwhelming. Half of the giant's hand sunk into the ground, scraping the soil and grasses high up into the air, aiming for Zen. If this strike hit Zen, he would have flown into the city wall. Under the pressure of the wall and palm, he would have easily been crushed. But of course, Zen didn't let that happen. With a stomp of his legs, he rolled over and avoided the palm that was as wide as the city wall. Humph. Watching Zen's actions, Lucille only snorted and struck once again, down from the sky with her other hand. Zen was like a fly in front of this giant. After having just taken to air and caught off guard, he was smacked into the ground by the giant's other hand. Well, you're weaker than I thought. I've only used the earth element power. As soon as she finished her sentence, she withdrew her left hand and viciously dug downward. The giant's left hand dug out the soil within a 100-foot radius. Having been smacked into the mud, Zen naturally fell into the giant's hand. Simultaneously, Lucille's right hand moved toward her left, her hands lightly clapped as if she was clapping for a certain someone. If one took notice, they'd hear her soft applause. At the same time, the giant's hands constantly clapped, which produced deafening rumbles. Zen was crushed mercilessly by the pair of giant hands. For each of Lucille's claps, the surrounding warriors on top of the city walls couldn't help but wince. What terrifying might! I'm afraid the brat has turned into minced meat. Goodness, this woman is too scary. Where are his illusion points? That brat should be dead by now. He should have returned to the city to revive himself. Everyone was puzzled. Zen should have been dead already, but why couldn't they see his illusion points? Could it be that he was still alive? Pock, pock, pock. Boom, 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 boom. As Lucille lightly patted her fair, clean hands, the giant slapped its own. Her clear eyes pierced through the yellow light to observe the situation outside. Under her continuous slaps, the soil scattered, and Zen's figure was revealed. The mud and gravel helped reduce the impact for Zen, but once they scattered away from him, the impact on him was direct. Pock, pock, pock. But something wasn't quite right, and surprise grew clear in Lucille's eyes. Even as Zen was slapped by the huge palms, Lucille could see that his aura hadn't weakened in the slightest, and there were no visible injuries on his body. It's no wonder he killed Norton like it was nothing. His body is actually this strong, she thought. The fact made her eyebrows furrow. The fingers of her left hand gently rose, binding Zen to her palm, as she raised her right hand and pressed down hard on him with her index finger. As Zen lay on his back in the giant's hand, the giant's finger pressed down on him with a frightening force. The power of this attack was concentrated, even more terrifying than the massive palm attacks. But at this moment, Zen smiled and raised his fist toward the giant's finger. Compared to the giant's finger, Zen's fist was almost invisible. The mere tip of the giant's finger was several times thicker than his whole body. The scene was shocking. In front of this giant, Zen was merely an ant that could be crushed with a finger. In the eyes of the bystanders, he was completely trapped in this calamity. Chapter 12-13, Magnetic Sacred Mountain. This guy's vitality is really something else. If it was someone else, they would have already been slapped into meat paste. Maybe he has some treasure that he's using to protect himself. But no matter how great that treasure is, he shouldn't be able to block that finger attack. I think this is the first time Lucille used her 5-element finger chain. It is a supreme divine weapon rank the 230th on the Universe Spirit Tablet. It's the G-Clan's most precious treasure. This guy still wants to resist. Seriously, there was a lot of commentary from the warriors who watched from the city wall and were clearly enjoying this fight happening right before their very eyes. In this world, there were more or less 3,000 supreme divine weapons. These weapons, mighty and divine, were mostly controlled by world lords and supreme lords. Not many warriors had the luxury of seeing weapons of this caliber up close, but they had more or less heard of them. Many of those present could clearly tell the origins of the 5-element finger chain. This was the reason why they were all so hyped up, since this was probably the only time in their lives that they'd be able to see a supreme divine weapon at work. The 5-element finger chain was created from a 5-colored divine stone. It contains the power of 5 different original laws. Someone graciously supplied just as the giant finger came crashing down. Boom! There was a loud booming sound as Zen's fist collided with this giant finger. Everyone expected him to be crushed by this attack owing to the sheer discrepancy in proportion of Zen to this giant finger. However, everyone gasped in surprise upon seeing the sight before them. There was a gap between the finger and the ground. In between was Zen, who remained standing. Once the dust settled, Zen remained where he stood, but there was an evident smile on his face. The giant forefinger, condensed from Earth Law, suddenly exploded and scattered by the wind. Zen's punch had actually managed to break through the attack. This guy. The audience on top of the city wall was rendered speechless by this scene. The same time the finger exploded, a wound appeared on Lucille's finger. Ow, it hurts, she frowned as fresh blood spurted from the wound. The pain was mostly a piece of cake for any warrior. Even someone who had just recently entered the early stage of body refining would not even blink from losing a finger, let alone a small scratch. However, Lucille had always been afraid of pain, so she couldn't help but gasp when the wound appeared on her finger. She put the finger in her mouth and sucked up all the blood in an attempt to soothe the area. Even the pale yellow giant that enveloped her also placed its hand on its lips. Zen quickly broke free from the giant's grip and sprinted quickly towards Lucille. The young girl frowned. Clearly Zen was much stronger than she had expected. However, he wasn't strong enough for her to take seriously. Lucille was still confident that he couldn't possibly be strong enough to defeat her. As she sucked on her wound, she quickly extended her other hand to slap Zen once again. The gigantic hand obstructed Zen's advance and his body was constantly rattled about. Each slap left a giant palm print on the ground from the momentous force carried in each attack. He looked like a small boat beaten around by a giant wave with the way he moved back and forth between the palms. Boom, boom. However, despite the attacks, Zen was visibly getting closer and closer to Lucille. Whoosh! When he was about 30 to 40 feet away, Zen stepped through space and rushed towards the giant's foot. This giant was a large wall of defense for Lucille. If he wanted to kill her, then he would have to go through this enemy first. However, just as he emerged from the space crack, Lucille gently raised her foot and threw a light kick. The giant mimicked her actions and aimed the kick towards Zen. Bam! Zen hadn't expected this, so he didn't have any time to dodge. The kick sent him flying back a good distance away. This was a welcoming sight for Lucille, who pulled her finger out of her mouth once she saw Zen flying away from her kick. Still, she couldn't be that much bothered with him and diverted her focus to her finger. All in all, this kick sent him back for more than 10 miles. Luckily, before he could slam onto the hard ground, Zen was able to steady himself and float in the air. He could still see the yellow giant in the distance. Just by using the Earth Law. She really is a tough one, Zen remarked sheepishly. But he couldn't give up. It wasn't in his nature, so he quickly steeled his resolve and went back into the fight head-on. Whoosh! Zen quickly rushed back to where he had been, his figure blurring into a streak of light as he shot forward once again. The sight of a quickly approaching Zen irritated Lucille, who decided she had enough. It was perhaps finally the time to take this fight seriously, since this guy had already proven his strength and resilience to her. There was never any worry of losing on Lucille's part. Sure, she felt a bit threatened, but she was confident that she would end up having the last laugh. "I'll give it another try," he murmured. Once he was close enough, Lucille suddenly reached out with her hand in an attempt to pull Zen down from the air. However, just as she did this, Zen quickly waved his hand to summon a palm-sized, 7-colored mountain in front of him. Magnetic Sacred Mountain. Whoosh! This magnetic sacred mountain had been refined using the secret technique. From a palm-sized mountain, it rapidly grew into a huge landmass enough to effectively crush the yellow giant. This mountain, Lucille murmured in surprise. However, it wasn't the time to marvel at the sight, since the very same mountain was about to crush her. Lucille quickly raised her hand in an attempt to shatter through the massive landmass. Boom! The yellow giant punched viciously at the oncoming magnetic sacred mountain in an attempt to prevent itself from getting crushed. However, brute force just wasn't going to cut it. This magnetic sacred mountain contained a mix of the 5 elements, which made it extremely reactive to law power. It was extremely sturdy and normal attacks were useless against it. So despite their best efforts, the mountain continued to press down onto its victims. Since it wasn't just any ordinary mountain, it was expected that its weight was also far from ordinary. The pressure was tantamount as it fell onto the giant's shoulders. Even Lucille, who was within the giant's body, could feel just how heavy the mountain was, to the point where she couldn't even move. Crack, 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 cracks began to appear on the giant's shoulder. The mountain's weight was definitely too much to bear, and anyone who had to stand underneath was sure to get crushed. There was a faint smile on Zen's face as he watched this scene. Now that he had his enemy where he wanted, he took this opportunity to finally get close to Lucille. He hoped this would be enough to kill her. He just couldn't help but feel excited as he thought about just how many illusion points were stored inside her body. However, just as he was about to get near her, Lucille's eyes flashed dangerously. With a flick of a wrist, she quickly dissipated the Earth Law that had condensed the giant from existence. Without any more resistance, the magnetic sacred mountain quickly smashed down to the ground. Anyone who had the unfortunate fate to be underneath this mountain was doomed. However, just as the mountain rushed down towards her, Lucille lightly tapped the ring on her right thumb and pulled out a faint golden wind from it. With a gentle wave, she quickly disappeared from the spot. The magnetic sacred mountain heavily pressed down onto the ground that immediately crumbled underneath its weight. It took a couple of 100 meters before the mountain settled and finally stopped sinking. Huff! To everyone's surprise, Lucille, who had previously been underneath the mountain, now stood on its peak, courtesy of the golden wind. It was extremely windy at the top, owing mostly to the results of their battle. Ivory ribbons flapped wildly behind her as the wind harshly whipped past. From here, she looked down at Zen with a strange, unnatural expression. Chapter 12-14, The 5 Elements Godly Way. The scene in front of Lucille was totally out of her expectation. She didn't foresee the appearance of a magnetic sacred mountain. It wasn't just her. All of the surrounding warriors gasped in shock as well when they saw it. Where did this brat move this mountain from? Lucille was almost pressed under the mountain. This mountain even destroyed her earth element power. I can carry an ordinary mountain, but this mountain is especially heavy that it's out of this world. This mountain has colorful lights and the aura of the 5 elements. It seems to be a magnetic sacred mountain. Many warriors also did not expect that Zen would use such an unreasonable method to break Lucille's earth element power. Meanwhile, Lucille floated in the air and looked down at the magnetic sacred mountain with a shocked but unwavering gaze. This is the magnetic sacred mountain. You have refined it yourself. However, Zen just looked at her impassively. Although he had refined this magnetic sacred mountain for a long time, he rarely brought it out to his fights. He also wondered why Lucille was so surprised when she saw him summon the magnetic sacred mountain. Yes, you're right, why are you so surprised? Zen said airily. Back then, Zen had found the method of refining a magnetic sacred mountain in the myriad manifestations of nature. The 5 elements of the magnetic sacred mountain were mixed, and it couldn't be refined no matter what type of law power was used. Some warriors in the upper world had tried to refine ordinary mountains through the earth law, but ordinary mountains weren't that hard, so it would be stupid to use them in a battle. Besides, a Soul Sea Realm warrior could easily break the earth, and even more an ordinary mountain. Only a sturdy mountain like the magnetic sacred mountain could be used to fight against enemies, but few of people in history had refined it. However, the blood refinement technique from the myriad manifestations of nature had a miraculous effect on refining the magnetic sacred mountain. Since Zen owned the fairy palace, he was lucky to find the blood refinement technique in the library. However, he wasn't aware that this technique wasn't passed down in the upper world. Lucille was quite familiar with the magnetic sacred mountain since she had the 5-element finger chain, and the combination of the 5 elements was her cultivation method. The magnetic sacred mountain could evenly combine the laws of the 5 elements, which made it a wonder of the universe. The combination of the 5 elements was to completely merge the 5 original laws with each other. This was one of the methods to step into the godly way, the 5 elements godly way. In this universe, there were several supreme lords, several 100,000 world lords, and numerous martial artists who had surpassed the Soul Sea Realm, the Spirit Supreme Realm and the Spirit Transformation Realm. Yet, only a handful of them had stepped into the godly way. All the living beings in the universe were destined to die at some point, including a Supreme Lord. A Supreme Lord's lifespan was around 300 million years, less than a tenth of the lifespan of a Grand Era. Even if they tried every method imaginable to avoid the advent of the 5 aging processes, death still awaited them in the end. Thus, it could be said that the greatest enemy of all living beings in the universe wasn't their opponents but themselves. It was time. Death will always come to visit in the end. No one can be the exception. It was said that 5 aging processes was the name of a sword which hung over everyone's head. When the time was right, it would take away the lives of many strongmen. It was a sword forged by the heavens, so no one could avoid the power of the sword. It stood at the highest point in the many laws of causality in the universe, which meant that it was the supreme rule nobody could ever go against. There was a small exception to the rule. If warriors could get in the godly way, they could escape the 5 aging processes, the death sword that hung above their heads, and they could obtain eternal life. That was also why the G clan allowed Lucille to cultivate the combination of the 5 elements. They hoped that if she continued the 5 elements godly way, she would eventually become an existence who surpassed the natural law of the heavens and become a true god. Lucille had stepped into the godly way through cultivating the combination of the 5 elements. If she succeeded in breaking through the Soul Sea Realm, the Spirit Supreme Realm and the Spirit Transformation Realm, she then would be qualified to become a world lord. It would be possible for her to refine a magnetic sacred mountain as well. After refining it, she could draw out the magnetic power from within and continue refining her own 5 elements. In fact, there was already a magnetic sacred mountain reserved for Lucille in the G clan. It was also very rare to find a magnetic sacred mountain in the upper world. The G clan had paid a huge price just to obtain one. However, the price was nothing since Lucille was the ace talent they had. The G clan's magnetic sacred mountain was a bit smaller than the one Zen had summoned. Before Lucille entered the illusion battlefield, she had been cultivating inside that mountain. With Lucille's current strength, she could destroy a small part of the magnetic sacred mountain with just one palm strike. Other warriors of the Soul Sea Realm would not be able to do that. Even Zen would not be able to destroy a rock on the magnetic sacred mountain. It was because Lucille could split part of the magnetic power in the magnetic sacred mountain and separate the 5 elements. However, she was far from being qualified to refine a magnetic sacred mountain. On the other hand, Zen had never cultivated the combination of the 5 elements. Despite that, he had refined this magnetic sacred mountain. How could Lucille stay calm at this? Zen could easily control the magnetic sacred mountain whether it was big or small. He had completely refined this mountain. Even G clan's patriarch, who had half a step into the 5 elements godly way, most likely wasn't able to refine a magnetic sacred mountain to such an extent. However, Lucille could also tell that although Zen had refined this magnetic sacred mountain, he didn't seem to know how to control the magnetic power inside it. Then again, she didn't expect him to summon the mountain just to throw it at her. Therefore, she didn't know what to say about Zen's attacks. This couldn't be blamed on Zen, either. What Zen had found written in the myriad manifestations of nature in the library wasn't a type of cultivation method. It detailed how to practice the blood refinement technique, but it did not tell Zen how to make use of a magnetic sacred mountain. Thus, Zen had only used the mountain to smash Lucille ever since. Although such a method was rather clumsy, its actual power should not be underestimated. Even Lucille was almost hit by the mountain. She would have died had she been pressed under it. What method you used to refine this magnetic sacred mountain? Lucille's heart started to hammer wildly in her chest at Zen's words. She couldn't suppress her excitement at that moment, no matter how cold she was. As the ace talent in the G clan, she had to shoulder her whole clan's hopes. It would be of truly great benefit to her combination of the 5 elements if she could refine the magnetic sacred mountain. Why should I tell you? Zen asked with a smile. Lucille frowned at this and said, if you can teach me the method, I'll let you go. Let me go? Zen's lips curved into a scornful grin. Are you sure you're a match for me? He added. There was no trace of doubt in Zen's piercing gaze, which slightly shook Lucille. This guy, does he have the confidence to defeat me? However, Lucille still didn't take him seriously, even though his magnetic sacred mountain had broken her earth element power. She knew well that this young man in front of her was indeed not bad, but it was impossible for him to defeat her. Hence, Lucille was more curious about him. How is this guy so confident? She thought. Lucille paid her last thought no mind and simply said, you can put forward other conditions, and my G clan will try to fulfill them for you. I am not referring to the illusion battlefield, but the outside world. Thoughtless minds was one of the 3 great human forces, and the G clan was the 3rd largest family of the thoughtless minds. The G clan was still a behemoth even if compared to many other races in the upper world, not to mention a warrior of the Soul Sea realm. In Lucille's eyes, the G clan could easily fulfill any request this youth had. Conditions. Zen smiled as he stared at Lucille. I'm not interested in that. I think a fight between us is much more fun. The Thunder Wind Divine Sword appeared in front of his chest once again as he spoke, and the smile on his face turned hard and serious. Zen didn't care about the G clan. He could even teach her the blood refinement technique without rewards. The Myriad Manifestations of Nature was an essay written by his master. It recorded strange happenings and also mentioned this blood refinement technique, which wasn't anything important. It was simply because Zen didn't like this haughty woman's attitude. He originally intended to stay outside the main city to get Lucille's illusion points, but now she said that she would spare his life for the blood refinement technique. There was no way he'd agree to that. At the same time, Lucille's eyes darkened at Zen's actions. Her voice deepened as she murmured, it seems that you need a good lesson. Very well, I will make you understand the gap between us. Chapter 12:15, Golden Sword Rain. Lucille's eyes held determination as she raised her wrist again and gently waved her fingers in the air. The thin chain dripped and hung down like crystal droplets between her fingers. Metal element power. The ring on her ring finger started to glow with a faint golden light, which gradually formed into a golden sword. The sword formed by the golden light didn't have a fixed shape. The rhombus-shaped golden ray was bound to Lucille's hand as it glinted marvelously under the light, like a snake's flicking tongue. At that moment, Lucille had quickly made her decision. She could tell that Zen wasn't someone who would easily admit losing. Only by defeating such a man could she make him realize the gap between him and reality. Thus, she finally decided to kill him once. If he got mad, she could just pay him 500,000 illusion points as an apology. Whoosh! A gust of golden wind blew and Lucille's figure faded away into the wind, gone from everyone's sight in a blink of an eye. Zen scanned his surroundings, and then his whole body suddenly flew backwards after he just focused for a second. Shoop, shoop, shoop. As Zen flew backwards in the air, a series of gilded swords came crashing down from the sky like a golden storm. Each swing of the gilded swords left a deep hole in the ground. The usually empty space was filled with small, densely packed holes in just a second. It looked like a complete mess. The rain of golden swords covered an enormous area. At first, Zen couldn't escape the storm of swords no matter how fast he retreated. After all, there were so many golden swords that even Zen couldn't completely dodge them all. Bash! One golden sword suddenly pierced Zen's collarbone. Had it been any other warrior's body, the golden sword would have completely penetrated it and crushed it on the ground. However, the sword only cut through Zen's flesh. One end of the sword was embedded into his shoulder blade. The spectators on top of the city wall couldn't help but admire Zen's immense strength. However, Zen was slightly shocked inside and thought, how could the golden sword's penetrating power be so strong? Lucille summoned the golden sword with merely a ring on her 5-element finger chain, which could be considered a type of profound mystery of the metal law. As even the rain of gilded swords could break his divine weapon body, he couldn't imagine what that golden sword in Lucille's hand could do. Shoop. Meanwhile, Lucille floated far away as her cold eyes looked at Zen's flickering figure. If you can't hold on, you can fly back to the main city. You will then have time to consider what you want from the G clan, she said faintly. The common warriors considered working with the G clan as a great opportunity and an honor. However, what Zen wanted was more than that. How stupid is that guy? Lucille said the G clan will fulfill any of his requests, but he just refused her. I've never seen such a stupid person. This is the G clan, a great clan that can influence the entire thoughtless minds. Guidance from the G clan's supreme lord would save him a lot of struggles in life. I guess there are some people in the world who are really stupid. I don't know what this guy is thinking. Why does he bother struggling when Lucille can defeat him easily anyway? Many warriors could only sigh and shake their heads at Zen's miserable state. They all thought that Zen was arrogant and didn't know how to appreciate favors. Some of them even suspected that Zen only displayed his strength to gain more power from the G clan, but they believed that Lucille would defeat him sooner or later. Bash! Another golden sword descended and pierced through Zen's thigh, and left a bloody hole on the side of his leg. Red blood flowed from his right shoulder and his left leg, which made him look like a gory mess. Although Zen appeared bedraggled, the small injury had little effect on him. However, his heart still felt heavy and overwhelmed. Such an ace talent like Lucille was truly extraordinary. Suddenly, Zen had a strange thought about Layla. Layla's strength 6 years ago wasn't bad, but she was still much weaker compared to Zen. However, Layla had just reached the Soul Sea realm at that time, like Zen had done now. He wondered if Layla had entered the illusion battlefield after 6 years. Like Lucille, Layla was also fated to lead the great world of chaos. Thus, he wondered who was stronger between the two of them. What I want? Zen's eyes narrowed into slits, and then he grinned. His body suddenly disappeared from where he stood, traversed through space and headed straight for her. But just as he entered the space, Lucille stretched her hand out and swept across, which caused the space below her to be distorted. As soon as Zen's figure reappeared, he found that he had returned to his original position. A warrior at Lucille's level had usually mastered the time law and space law. The moment when Zen used the space law to penetrate space, Lucille waved her hand and twisted the space he crossed over. That was why Zen went back to where he stood first even after summoning the space law. Thus, Zen's attack against Lucille was futile. When Zen faced Norton, he had also suffered a big loss when he crossed space. Just accept it. Then let's talk, Lucille said indifferently. Even though your body is as strong as a divine weapon, you can't withstand my attack. However, Zen acted as if he heard nothing. If he accepted his defeat in front of her, then there would be no need for him to continue his journey in the illusion battlefield. He could just leave directly. It's hard to get close to this woman, he murmured. His brows curved down into a frown. It was indeed difficult for him to break through the rain of sharp golden swords. When his space law failed to work, traces of white fog had once again appeared around Zen's body. 8 smoky melodies. The 8 smoky melodies didn't need the law power to activate it, so Lucille's 5-element finger chain didn't affect it. His voice became as light as a willow catkin when the 8 smoky melodies was unleashed. Any energy ripple could push his body away. The onlookers thought that Zen's movement technique was extremely nimble. Now, none of the golden swords hit Zen. What is this movement technique? Lucille saw Zen, who quickly twisted his body amidst the golden swords like a loach, and dodged the dense blades with ease. The most important thing was Lucille couldn't see through his movement technique at all. At that moment, Lucille finally understood that this man was not as simple as she had imagined. He must be a great warrior. However, all the ace talents from the blessed Buddha land were monks. She also knew every ace talent from the thoughtless minds, and she had never heard of an ace talent named Thad in the Humanity Alliance. That meant he was not from any of the top 3 human forces. Then, where was he from? Now, the battle was currently at an impasse because Zen activated the 8 smoky melodies. Even though there was a deadlock, the battle was still quite entertaining. The martial artists found it amazing to watch Zen's figure shuttle through the rain of golden swords. Some of them even looked at Zen with such delight that they wanted to find a trace of mystery in Zen's technique and comprehend it. The 8 smoky melodies' only principle was to take advantage of the situation. There was no mystery or pattern. It was simply impossible for them to see through any of it by just relying on Zen's floating movement technique. This man, at that point, Lucille couldn't hold herself back anymore. There was no way she'd believe that she couldn't deal with him. As she thought about it, Lucille disappeared in the golden wind again. Here she is, Zen murmured. He had been floating in the golden sword storm for quite a while now, waiting for this very moment. The golden wind flashed, and then Lucille suddenly appeared behind Zen. The golden light in her palm shot out and extended into a 10 feet long golden sword, which pierced towards Zen. However, it was like Zen had grown a pair of eyes behind him. His body started to sway in a spiral movement as he followed the golden sword and circled around it, careful to keep a distance of 3 inches during the whole process. Then, he appeared in front of Lucille in a mere second. The Thunderwind Divine Sword in his hand flashed with a blue light as he swung it towards Lucille's face. Their distance now was the closest they ever got to each other, ever since their fight had started. Lucille didn't expect that Zen would fly backwards in his extremely precise control of the distance. He had flown close to her golden sword but always kept 3 inches between them. His method was simply amazing. Chapter 12:16, Competing against Zen. At the macro level, measuring a warrior's strength was to measure his momentum and might. But at the micro level, a warrior's true strength was measured by their ability to control their power and movement speed. This ability could be regarded as the absolute control of strength. As a sort of test, some warriors placed birds in their hands. When the birds were about to fly away, the warriors would move their hands slightly, making the birds unable to move their feet, causing them to fall back into the palms. Such was a sign that warriors had mastered the skill of absolute control. But such a method wasn't flawless. Even the early-stage warriors, still going through body refinement, would be able to grasp what was known as the skill of stopping birds. Some warriors who were more skilled could even place the bird on their heads, shoulders, and chest. Even in these positions, the warrior could stop the bird from flying away. Some could even stop not only birds, but also flies and mosquitoes. As mosquitoes were much smaller, the warriors had to be able to sense and withdraw the force that supported them the moment they flew away. This test was more difficult than stopping a bird. But compared to what Zen was currently doing, stopping a mosquito was a mere side trick. When Lucille was looking down on Zen from high up in the sky, watching his strikes and skill in movement during his performance in the sword rain, she already noticed how remarkable he was. As she tried stabbing him with her sword, she suddenly realized the mysteries within it. Zen maintained a distance of 3 inches from each of the descending golden swords, circling the sword that she thrust out. This was a display of his absolute control of strength and movement speed. Never had Lucille seen control to such an extent. How did Zen do it? After witnessing his strange movement skill, Lucille decided to take Zen on as an opponent qualified to face her. Whoosh! Not giving Lucille a chance to consider anything else, he flew backward and swung the Thunderwind Divine Sword directly toward her. Facing his sword strike, Lucille didn't dodge. Given the situation, all of her attention was focused on his movement skill, but she wanted to find out what method he used to control his distance so exactly. When the blue sword light struck down, Lucille raised her right hand and grabbed onto his sword. Whoosh! Lucille's right hand was adorned with the 5-element finger chain, connecting with her 5 fingers, forming a layer of protection. As she stretched out her hand, she made use of the chain to grip the sword firmly in her hand. While fighting warriors at the same cultivation level, Zen had always been the only one to grab hold of others' swords. Perhaps, Lucille was the first one to hold his. The moment she gripped his sword, the rings on her 5 fingers began glowing with a strange light, very similar to the color of the magnetic sacred mountain. It was the power formed from the fusion of the 5 original law's powers. But Lucille's cultivation base wasn't high enough. The power she fused was inferior to that of the magnetic sacred mountain. Even so, the use of the 5 elements was already extremely powerful. With that, Lucille believed that it was impossible for Zen to escape after grasping his sword. But in the next moment, her eyes suddenly lit up in surprise. As she gripped the blade, she could feel the power on the sword increase explosively. Was that power from Zen? The sharp increase in power took her aback. Meanwhile, the dragon scales were being lit up one after another. Great power quickly rushed into the Thunderwind Divine Sword. Initially, she had relied on the power of the 5 elements in her finger chain to gain the upper hand. She was about to say that Zen was outstanding enough to force her to employ the power of all 5 elements. After all, it wasn't ideal for her to display her full power at that moment, she only intended to make use of it when she fought other ace talents in the illusion battlefield. But the power that spread out from the Thunderwind Divine Sword astonished Lucille, forcing back the words she had for Zen. The Thunderwind Divine Sword was only 4 inches wide and 4 feet long, but the power within it had the weight of a star. Under the suppression of this power, Lucille began sinking inch by inch. Zen gripped his sword tightly and unmovingly, looking down at her indifferently. When facing warriors of the same rank, Lucille was always the one to look down on the others. Now that she had to look up at Zen, her originally cold expression finally turned stubborn. Because there were too few with the ability to stand a chance against her, she didn't seem too keen on competing with anyone. Being an ace talent of the G-clan, she was extraordinary, holding such a high status, not anyone could just compete with her. As she was unwilling to risk being at a disadvantage, the sea of life vitality within her inner world began rolling crazily. A massive tsunami of life vitality rolled out in her soul sea with an irresistible force. Simultaneously, a massive whirlpool appeared. There seemed to be no limit to the speed at which the life vitality could be extracted. So when warriors used some powerful moves that excessively consumed life vitality, it would take quite a long time to prepare. But Lucille's inner world was a bit different. Her soul sea was extremely special, with the ability to suck out all the life vitality in a short period of time. This sort of soul sea was called the Night Tide Sea. Out of the trillions of soul sea realm warriors, she was the only one with such. The seawater formed by the life vitality within Lucille's inner world turned into a massive whirlpool as it was pulled out from her body. She then poured the life vitality into her 5-element finger chain, triggering the 5 rings to shine brilliantly as she kept a tight grip on Zen's long sword. They were competing in strength, but Lucille wouldn't let herself fall inferior to any man. Under the influence of the 5 elements, power, Lucille gradually gained the upper hand. Her body rose higher and higher, reaching an altitude beyond where Zen was. But she managed to keep that up for barely 3 seconds. Her pupils widened in surprise as she felt the power from the sword. It increased unexpectedly by leaps and bounds. What was the limit of Zen's power? How could he still increase it by so much? Previously, Zen had only pushed forth with the power of 6,000 dragon scales. When he felt the boundless power of the 5 elements, he activated the power of another 6,000 dragon scales, meaning he had instantly doubled his power to 12,000 dragon scales. Lucille had no idea he could do such a thing. In the past few years, Zen had once again smelted the sacred and divine weapons that he hadn't been using in order to obtain a lot of heavenly essence. Currently, Zen had already ignited the power of 40,000 dragon scales. But he didn't have that much heavenly essence. During his experiment, he found that his divine weapon body could easily withstand the power of 40,000 dragon scales. The only problem was the lack of heavenly essence. After Zen ascended to the upper world, he had no time to rest during his journey. Naturally, he didn't have the time to buy any fairy or sacred weapons, so he thought it was quite a shame. Once, Zen had every intention of asking Livingston to forge some weapons for him to melt. But Livingston was completely immersed in refining weapons and wholeheartedly tried to turn the sword embryo into a real one. In the past few years, he barely left the weapon refining workshop. Facing Zen who had doubled his power, Lucille fell once again. This time, it became clear to her how stupid it was to fight against Zen. And she had another issue. The life vitality in her body had already been completely used up. As the life vitality in her inner world was just sucked out, over 99% of her life vitality sea had already been depleted. It should be over, right? Zen smiled faintly as the sword intent suddenly appeared in the Thunderwind Divine Sword. The sword intent moved along the blade and flew straight at Lucille in an instant. If she was hit by it, she would have already been beheaded and would have had to return to the main city for revival. It wasn't that Zen was merciless, but in order to get the illusion points, he had no other choice but to kill her. HMPH. Lucille only snorted coldly. Before Zen's sword intent could reach her, a golden wind swept over and Lucille's figure disappeared once again. Not even Zen could match her speed. Keeping her balance, Lucille lightly patted her wrist and pulled out dozens of life vitality jades. The moment she brought them out, she crushed them in her hands, releasing the life vitality, turning it into white fog. Quickly, she absorbed it all and replenished the life vitality within her body. Relying on only her speed, she already made herself invincible as she faced Zen just then. But in the contest of pure strength, Zen clearly had the upper hand. Chapter 12:17, The Crescent Blade. Generally speaking, Soul Sea Realm warriors should only need 3 life vitality jades to replenish their soul seas. However, Lucille was different. As the ace talent in her family, she was personally assisted by her patriarch in expanding her soul sea by 3 times when she established it. This was essential since she practiced the 5 elements godly way, which made her consume far more life vitality than the average warriors. Zen's chaotic soul sea was quite suitable for the 5 elements godly way if one thought about it, since the chaotic energy condensed within his body was far greater than an ordinary life vitality sea. Lucille, who needed to replenish her soul sea, quickly shattered 10 life vitality jades all at once. A torrential rain suddenly poured down in her inner world, flooding her almost dried up soul sea with much needed life vitality. As she got her bearings, Lucille couldn't help but stare at Zen in astonishment. She never thought his strength would be this terrifying. Or was it strength? That couldn't be it. Lucille was someone who had witnessed many displays of innate superhuman strength. Norden was a good example. That guy and also his father were both born with great strength and berserker-like qualities. Norden's father had the cultivation of a world lord and was quite famous in the thoughtless minds. They were the type of people who drew confidence from their body's strength and used whatever means to fight for what they wanted. For them, reaching an extremely terrifying level of sheer strength was paramount. It was by relying on pure energy could they hope to one day shatter space, destroy the heavens, and become gods. Such was the way of a berserker warrior. Of course, nobody knew for certain if what people like Norden and his father aimed for was possible. Nobody had yet reached such a level of strength to shatter space and destroy the heavens in the current grand era. However, the universe was filled with countless warriors with varying cultivation methods. No one way was absolute. For some, strength was the only way to go, while others might not necessarily think the same way. Norden, however, was his father's successor and surely went on to follow his path. He was already pretty powerful as a Soul Sea Realm warrior. Lucille herself had never seen anyone on par with him when it came to strength. But Zen had been able to kill both Norden and Ethan. It wasn't just strength that Zen possessed but superhuman power. Norden and Ethan were no match for him. However, there were varying opinions among the crowd watching. Just now, Lucille must have been at a disadvantage. She used the power of the 5 elements, but what kind of power did that young man use? I didn't feel any life vitality fluctuation from his body. If I'm not wrong, I think all he did was use his body's strength. He didn't activate his life vitality or use any forceful energy. This remark momentarily stunned the crowd into silence. All of them looked at the person who spoke with wide eyes before erupting into a frenzy. How is that possible? How can pure physical strength have such an effect? I also think it's impossible. The crowd was divided in whether or not Zen only used his physical strength, but they could all agree that Lucille had just suffered a loss in this fight. This was very much obvious to them. The 10 life vitality jades had done their work stabilizing Lucille, whose face was slowly regaining that healthy glow. However, her mind was currently in a state of shambles. It was pretty clear to her now that she was scared of Zen. Zen, on the other hand, hadn't moved at all. He merely stood his ground and had a smile on his face. The spectators on top of the city wall were still at a loss as to how Zen forced Lucille to retreat. He didn't use any theurgy at all, so how exactly did he do it? They could only scratch their heads in frustration as they thought of a possible answer. Lucille had been forced into submission twice now. Back when Zen summoned the magnetic sacred mountain, she had summoned a burst of golden wind in order to retreat into safety. Could it be that Zen was even stronger than Lucille? There weren't many ace talents among the juniors. The ones who stood at the top were only those capable of leading the world of chaos, meaning they would be mainstays once the heavens' calamity came. However, there were perhaps thousands of these highly talented warriors scattered across the universe. The heavens had sown many seeds, but not every single one could grow strong and tall. Only the best among the seeds could hope to emerge on top. Where did Zen come from? Most of the warriors here came from the thoughtless minds and could easily recognize the names of those ace talents in their group. They knew of their backgrounds, their identities, and their capabilities. Nathan Xuanyuan and Lawson Lai, for example, were the ace talents in their group. However, this young man in front of them was unknown. There was no way they wouldn't be able to recognize him if he was from the thoughtless minds. Someone so powerful couldn't have stayed in the shadows for so long. Zen stood his ground and gave Lucille enough time to sort herself out, not taking advantage of the fact that she was running out of life vitality. She might be hard to deal with, but Zen wasn't someone who fought dirty. So long as she didn't try to escape to the main city, then his victory was assured. But Zen wasn't worried about that. He didn't think it was in her personality to run back and cower within the main city's walls. Inside Lucille's soul sea, the torrential rains had finished pouring and her life vitality sea had slowly filled up and calmed down from the unprecedented storm. She had previously tried to suppress Zen using her cultivation base, but she never expected that she would be at a disadvantage. Still, she wasn't completely powerless. Lucille still had a few tricks up her sleeves. Her attitude towards this fight had now gone a complete 180. She knew she had to take this seriously now. Lucille straightened and gently stood on tiptoe. As she did this, a faint ray of light appeared on her crescent-embroidered shoes. These shoes initially looked like a pair of ordinary cloth shoes, but the light quickly spread around her feet and turned into a sharp crescent blade. With a smile, Lucille intertwined her arms and summoned a gentle, golden wind, causing her figure to disappear. The sight of the crescent blade alarmed Zen greatly. It was the moment he realized that Lucille wasn't the same as Norton, Lane, or the other warriors from before. Those were mere small fry he could defeat easily. However, Lucille was someone he could very well lose to if he wasn't careful. So the moment she disappeared with her crescent blade, Zen quickly summoned a white mist and let it surround his body. The 8 smoky melodies. He was able to activate it just in time to come face to face with Lucille. The golden wind aided her speed and helped her get to Zen quickly. The young girl was upside down and obviously looked at him with intense killing intent. Whoosh! Her entire body spun 180 degrees and the crescent blade on her feet drew a blinding half circle as it came slashing down towards Zen. These events all happened extremely fast. From the moment Zen activated the 8 smoky melodies to Lucille slashing down the crescent blade towards him, everything took place in just a blink of an eye. The spectators were at the edge of their seats. One moment Lucille was shattering life vitality jades and the next she was upside down and already so close to Zen. Meanwhile, Zen couldn't help but think just how lucky it was that he was able to activate the 8 smoky melodies just in time. Any strike from Lucille would cut his head off already if he wasn't careful. He quickly flew backwards just as she struck. But the 8 smoky melodies' reaction was quite slow. Back then, Zen was able to avoid his opponent's attacks effortlessly. The fiercer and faster the attacks, the better he could dodge them. He was always able to maintain a distance of 3 inches between him and his opponents. That time, when he faced against an ogre warrior in the wilderness who shot an arrow at him, Zen was able to dodge it with mere 3 inches to spare. However, Lucille's movements were incredibly fast, far surpassing the 8 smoky melodies' limits. The crescent blade had gone past the distance of 3 inches and was close to slashing Zen's face. Chapter 12:18, Death Chain. As Zen released the 8 smoky melodies, his entire body tumbled backwards. The crescent blade left a bloody scar several inches long on Zen's face in almost the same instant that the barrier of the 8 smoky melodies threw him backwards. The tumble motion was Zen's sharp reaction to the impending crisis, and it was this movement that had saved him from calamity. If he hadn't thrown himself backwards, Lucille's attack would have crushed Zen's head with that crescent blade. Huff, huff, both of them had flipped in the air. Lucille was repelled backwards by the smoky barrier which Zen had created. When Lucille saw that she did not manage to do anything other than scratch him with her formidable attack, she coldly snorted. With a sweep of her golden wind, her figure disappeared again. She appeared again and assumed a station another 100 feet from Zen, and stood on the top of the magnetic sacred mountain. This guy's reaction is really fast, she thought, secretly impressed. In the eyes of the bystanders, Lucille had launched an attack right after she had recovered. It could be said that she seemed to be in a hurry. However, she knew very well that, whether it was its timing or angle, this move had already reached its limits, and she still had not managed to do more than give Zen a close shave. She hadn't expected that Zen would still have been able to dodge the sudden attack which all of her other opponents had been unable to defend against in time. As for Zen, he was quite speechless as he looked at the small embroidered shoes on Lucille's feet and the crescent blade concealed under them. Gingerly, he wiped away some of the blood which was trickling from the cut along his face. Zen was not overly concerned by this superficial injury as his body would heal swiftly. This woman has so many tricks up her sleeve. Even something as mundane as a pair of embroidered shoes could hide such a cold killing intent. Are all the female cultivators in the upper world talented like this? He wondered, still somewhat surprised. Lucille was like this, so was Layla. They used all sorts of methods, and every single one of their methods could have become a great killing tool in the hands of any normal warrior. To these female cultivators it seemed that these methods were mere tinkering and not their only means of attack. Zen wondered darkly what else was still in store for him. While he was left feeling helpless, Lucille, who was standing on top of the magnetic sacred mountain, was shining with the golden light again. Zen knew by now what that meant. Here it comes again, he muttered warily. Zen turned over again in the air. At the same time, he drew out his chaotic energy and circulated his cultivation method. The amount of white fog that condensed on the surface of Zen's body had also increased. He was fully surrounded by a dense fog screen which made it difficult to determine his exact location. Even though Zen had activated the 8 smoky melodies to its limit, her crescent blade was still a bit faster. As she kicked out like a lightning strike, her weapon easily passed that 3-inch distance and was once again slicing towards Zen. Puff. This time, Zen was still unable to completely dodge Lucille's kick, and the crescent blade instantly cut into the flesh of his upper arm. Now is the time, Zen shouted in his heart. He already knew that he could not keep dodging. He resolutely twisted his body to use his left arm to block. The moment his arm was cut, his right hand reached out swiftly to grab Lucille's foot. If binding and killing this woman at the cost of only one arm was Zen's chance to win, then he would accept it gladly. However, just his fingers touched Lucille's instep and, before he could grab her, a golden light flashed and he felt his fingers close on nothing but air. Lucille's figure once again disappeared from in front of Zen, returning to appear on her vantage point on the top of the magnetic sacred mountain. Although her attack had succeeded, her face was a bit unnatural and strained now. Her foot was almost grabbed by Zen. Never in all her time in the illusion battlefield had this happened. That unnatural expression only remained on her face for an instant, but Zen identified it as fear. The golden wind roared and she once again attacked Zen without the slightest hesitation or warning. She knew that with her incredible speed, it was impossible for Zen to catch her. As long as she could maintain this status quo, he would definitely lose to her. Therefore, she wasn't willing to give Zen the slightest bit of time to prepare a strategy to deal with her. Whoosh, puff. Every time Lucille advanced and appeared, a deep bloody gash would appear on Zen's body. The evidence of her proficiency abounded and Zen was soon crisscrossed with bloody cuts. The problem Zen was facing right now was almost the same as the situation when he had dealt with the celestial mice. Though both the celestial mice and Lucille were gifted with exceptional speed, those celestial mice had been stupid, and they didn't deal as much damage to him as Lucille had already done. It was obviously impossible to also trap Lucille with heavenly tribulation as Zen had done with the celestial mice. She was so much more powerful than that already. While Zen was being attacked by Lucille, his mind was also working hard. He knew that if he couldn't break out of this situation, he would lose sooner or later. Puff, puff, streams of blood sprayed out again, as Lucille kept advancing her swift attacks and then retreating again. Ha ha, Lucille becomes really serious now. Look. Her attacks are as smooth as flowing water, one after one. She doesn't allow her opponent a chance to catch his breath. With her strength and speed, I'm afraid that she could easily kill a warrior at the middle stage of the Spirit Supreme realm. Like I said, an ace talent is an ace talent. How could this guy hope to defeat her? What's more, Lucille has only displayed half of her power so far, right? I heard that Lucy has also entered the illusion battlefield. Lucille has actually entered the illusion battlefield under 2 identities at the same time. She must have divided herself to be able to achieve that feat. But I wonder if she will become one with Lucy in the later battles. Lucille's repetitive attacks were becoming much more skillful, and definitely more ferocious. She had specially focused her attacks on Zen's vital parts, and every move of hers could kill him. At the speed of light, she slashed and cut at his eyes, throat and abdomen, hoping to blind, decapitate and disembowel him. It was because Zen's ability to predict danger was so extremely accurate that he could always avoid the most serious injuries at the last critical moment, but the wounds on his body had still continued to increase. She was slicing him up bit by bit. Die. Another golden wind gathered momentum and swept over. A murderous smile appeared on Lucille's face and there was a twinkle of expectation in her dark eyes now. She had found an unexpected flaw in Zen's defenses, and after this attack, she would be able to end his life. Being in a stalemate with this insignificant person for so long had forced her to use the crescent blade, and Lucille couldn't help but sigh in her heart that this universe was truly marvelous. It was a wonder that such a powerful yet insignificant person had shown up from nowhere, while she had not noticed him at all. She then realized that earlier she had underestimated the difficulty of the illusion battlefield. This display of prowess had been both entertaining and challenging and Lucille was feeling contented at this opportunity to really display her talents. However, this time, her attack missed Zen. The warriors on the wall gasped in puzzlement and looked at each other with confused faces. How could Lucille miss? Zen had deliberately shown that flaw. Lucille did not care overly much that she had missed in her attack on him. This kind of duplicitous action could only be described as boring trickery in her eyes. She only valued strength and skill, not deception. Since Zen was, in her opinion, destined to be unable to catch her, she might as well repeat the attack a few more times. With a flash of the golden wind, she planned to avoid any possible retaliation from him again. But at this moment, a chain appeared in Zen's hand. It was a bright silver chain that looked shiny and new. However, when Lucille focused on the chain, a hint of doubt flashed on her face. Something was not as it appeared here, but she could not figure it out. What is this guy planning to do? Does he want to use this chain to lock me? Is that even possible? However, as this thought appeared in her mind, she began to draw into the golden wind, preparing to quickly step through the distance between her and Zen. While she was busy gathering her strength, one end of the chain had suddenly turned into a silver ribbon of light, and it instantly spread towards Lucille. This end of the chain suddenly locked onto her foot at a speed that exceeded Lucille's imagination. She was caught. The other end was locked onto Zen. He had her tethered to him. Upon seeing this, Lucille immediately became anxious and she began to pull at the chain, hoping to find a way to escape this bond. No matter how hard she tried, she could not figure out how this chain could have been so fast. How had it attached itself to her with such speed? Why couldn't she escape using the profound mysteries of the wind law? It was a talent that she had always relied on, and it had never failed her, until now. Whoosh! Her figure was still flashing crazily as she tried to beat a retreat. However, no matter how hard Lucille tried to escape, she was unable to throw off the chain on her foot. Despite flashing, she simply appeared next to Zen again and again. She was like a tied-up bird. No matter how she spread her wings to soar into the sky, she could only fly to the end of the chain and would then be pulled back to her original position. She was leashed. Lucille naturally couldn't have imagined that Zen's death chain would even be able to lock down a Supreme Lord. Although she was an ace talent of the G clan, her strength couldn't be stronger than a Supreme Lord's, could it? This death chain had been obtained from the few pieces that Zen's master had bestowed upon him. He had been waiting for an opportunity to test it, and now he had been able to successfully tether an ace talent. The formidable weapon could be considered a mini version of the desperate melee. The desperate melee could lock dozens of people together, and only one would survive. As for the death chain in Zen's hands, it could lock the user together with his opponent. After being locked by the death chain, the two of them only had one option for escape, and that was to kill the other one. If the opponent's strength was greater than Zen's, then using the death chain was absolutely courting his own death. It would bring a dangerous foe within reach and there was no space to dodge or hide from attacks now. However, the death chain belonged to Zen after all. He was the one who had to choose to lock or not, and could lock whoever he wanted. This Lucille in front of him was surprisingly fast. Zen had dodged and retreated while pondering on how to break the situation, then he suddenly remembered that he still had this magic weapon and he wondered if it would work. He had actually never used it before. Whoosh! Streaks of golden wind were flashing. Lucille's silhouette kept appearing and disappearing in the golden wind. However, no matter how much she struggled, she couldn't get more than 10 feet away from Zen as the chain held her locked in place. No matter how fast she was, she still couldn't break free from this chain. Although Zen looked miserable with his multitude of bloody cuts, he knew that he had already won when the death chain had locked onto Lucille. The death chain could only extend a distance of 10 feet. With a slight tug from Zen, Lucille was yanked back by Zen's immense power. Realizing that she was unable to escape from his chain, a determined look appeared on Lucille's face. She no longer struggled meaninglessly, instead, she once again drained all of the life vitality in her body. Accompanied by the brilliant luster of the 5-element finger chain, the life vitality turned into a 5-colored palm print and rushed towards Zen with murderous intent. Chapter 12:19, Rising Rapidly. Facing Lucille's 5-colored palm print, Zen's face was filled with happiness. In that instant, Zen activated the power of 30,000 dragon scales. He also sent a palm strike toward Lucille. However, within this ordinary palm strike was an unimaginable power. In fact, it was out of helplessness that Lucille had used the 5-element palm print against Zen. It was just like what the bystanders had said, Lucille was not in her complete form right now. At this very moment, in another supreme world of the illusion battlefield, there was another Lucille, Lucy. One soul in 2 bodies. Although such cultivation methods were rare in the universe, they did exist. It was similar to Yolanda's cultivation method, with which she could split her own soul into 1,000,000 pieces. However, after she activated the soul split spell, she could only gain enlightenment. On the other hand, with Lucille's one soul in two bodies, although the two bodies shared one soul, they could cultivate separately. When the two of them merged, she would become complete as the true ace talent of the G clan. Because of this, right now, Lucille could only use the earth element power and the metal element power. The other three original laws were very weak, so the powers of the 5 elements she released weren't complete. Bam! This palm print was the only choice Lucille had. If Lucy was here, it would be hard to say whether she would have won or lost against Zen's palm strike. Since Lucy's combat style was completely different from hers, after the two of them merged, their strengths and weaknesses would complement each other, which would give her the perfect form of the 5 elements. That was the true cultivation of the 5 elements. But now, under Zen's attack, Lucille's 5-element palm print started to crumble. "It's over," Zen said with a smile. After breaking Lucille's attack, he placed his hand on Lucille's forehead. He had a gentle expression on his face, as if he was merely helping Lucille wipe the sweat on her forehead. However, with a light wave of his hand, a huge force spread out, causing Lucille's body to directly disintegrate in front of everyone. A red light wrapped around Lucille's soul and flew toward the main city. At the same time, the illusion points burst out from her dissipated body. Countless illusion points began to spread out and grow, reaching 20 to 30 feet. The martial artists on the city walls were seeing so many illusion points that all of their eyes almost bulged out in surprise. Since Lucille had been the Lord of the city, there were 8 butchers that had helped her gather illusion points day and night. Under her absolute control, the number of illusion points she had collected was definitely not a small one. Although everyone had been mentally prepared to see a large number of illusion points, they were still surprised by the sight in front of them because it far exceeded their expectations. This was too much. Even Zen was shocked when he saw these countless sparkling illusion points. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The illusion points quickly flew toward Zen and entered his body. The number of illusion points Zen possessed soared at once. At the same time, his ranking in the pyramid was rising rapidly. Oh my, Zen realized that he now possessed around 4.6 million illusion points. After killing Norton, he had taken away hundreds of thousands of illusion points from him. Now, after killing Lucille, he had gained about 4 million illusion points. Since he had taken away half of her points, it meant that Lucille must have had more than 8 million points in her body. The number of illusion points this woman had accumulated was far beyond Zen's imagination. After gaining all these illusion points, Zen's rank had instantly skyrocketed to 309th in this supreme world and 14,000th in the entire illusion battlefield. Among 1,000,000,000,000 warriors, the top 100,000 were already dazzling existences. Although Zen was only at the 14,000th place, countless people around the universe were staring at his name in awe. At this moment, the name, Zen Luo, once again became a topic of discussion. Zen, this is the Zen who tells stories. He actually entered the top 100,000. Look clearly, his rank is the 14,000th. And he's ranked the 309th of the supreme world he is in. This guy is very strong. If he continues to rush upward, I'm afraid he'll be able to match those ace talents. Humph, what's so special about that? His fairy palace is the most valuable treasure out of all the treasures. If I could obtain such a fairy palace, I would definitely be the strongest. Haha, first of all, you'd have to really possess such a fairy palace. Then, you'd have to cultivate and reach the Soul Sea realm before you. There were heated discussions in every corner of the universe, and all of them were about Zen. The universe's attention on Zen had reached an unprecedented level. Since Zen had already made it to the top part of the rankings, everyone was wondering how far he could possibly go. Was he merely a flash in the pan, or was he going to rush straight all the way to the top? While these discussions were going on in the rest of the universe, the atmosphere in the Mist Palace was extremely lively. Since Zen was from the Mist Palace, their expectations for him had been extremely high. Of course, since Zen hadn't previously made any achievement, a lot of people had been worried about him. Although Yolanda's expression was calm, she was a little dissatisfied. She knew in her heart that Zen would definitely soar to the top, but she didn't like how calm he was being. She was worried that he would stay in the illusion battlefield for a long time without getting anything. Now, when she heard Zen's sudden rise in ranking, her lips finally curled up into a smile. You're only at the 14,000th rank. I wonder when you will charge into the top 1,000 rankings, she murmured to herself. Her confidence in Zen was the same as always. The Mist Palace was in an uproar, but the atmosphere in another place was extremely solemn. Thoughtless minds. The G clan. In the last few years, the patriarch of the G clan had rarely shown up to meetings. Even though the G clan was considered a family, in reality, the number of warriors with the surname G exceeded 1 million, which was equivalent to the population of a large country. And if the G clan could be considered a country, then the patriarch was the supreme existence of that country. Since the patriarch himself had appeared, how could any of the important members of the G clan be absent? This time, the illusion battlefield was extremely important to the G clan. Naturally, Lucille was the reason. G clan had a total of 3 ace talents. However, the other 2 ace talents, Fraser G and Sylvia G, were no match for Lucille G. Although the strength of these 2 ace talents was by no means little, they were not on the same level as Lucille. Both Fraser and Sylvia could only barely fight against one of Lucille's 2 bodies, which only had half of Lucille's complete power. Thus, Lucille was the only hope of the G clan. They all hoped that one day, Lucille would become the godly genius of the G clan. This time, the opening of the illusion battlefield was a great opportunity. At this moment, Lucille's ranking was very eye-catching. She was already in the top 10 of the pyramid. The cultivators ahead of her were all godly geniuses of the various great clans. They were unique existences who exceeded the ace talents. These godly geniuses were strong enough to change the fate and direction of their clans. Any clan would be willing to spend all their resources on their godly geniuses. This was because there was a saying in the universe that went, to destroy a powerful clan, one must first kill the godly genius of that clan. If the godly genius wasn't killed, they would rely on their monstrous destiny and incredible talent to fight their way back one day. Therefore, when it came to great clans, even when their clans were destroyed, their godly geniuses could not be killed. The godly genius was only a seedling, but could become the future of the entire clan. There was something mystical about these words. After all, some of the great clans had a very solid foundation. If the godly genius of such a clan really did perish, then the clan would be able to foster a new one. However, from this saying, it could be seen just how much importance these clans placed on their godly geniuses. To be able to make it into the top 10 of the entire illusion battlefield was already very impressive, but Lucille had an innate advantage in the illusion battlefield. While everyone in the illusion battlefield was fighting alone, Lucille had 2 bodies, both of which were extremely strong. Naturally, her number of illusion points was twice that of the other ace talents, and even the number of some godly geniuses. Even so, the G clan was not satisfied with Lucille's ranking. They wanted Lucille to be the first. There was no second choice, only first. After nurturing her for so many years, the G clan would be ashamed if she didn't become the first. However, on the pyramid in front of the G clan and the patriarch, Lucille's name suddenly fell down rapidly. From the 7th rank, she dropped directly down to the 700th. Chapter 12:20, Lucy. The competition in the illusion battlefield was quite intense. Since there were many main cities in the illusion battlefield and the majority of the martial artists could only move in a certain area, it was impossible for them to pass through many main cities in a short period of time. Therefore, the vast majority of warriors attacked and killed others to get illusion points around a main city. Of course, everyone had different ways to get illusion points. Lucille, for example, took control of a main city and collected illusion points like she was collecting tax. All the warriors in the city had to pay taxes, and no one could escape. Of course, if she had collected illusion points merely by taking up a city, it would have been impossible for her to reach such a high ranking. However, Lucille practiced one soul in 2 bodies. Her duplicate form, Lucy, was wandering around in another supreme world to gather illusion points there. The number of illusion points Lucy obtained was also recorded under Lucille's name. This was the main reason why Lucille had been able to take the lead and be ranked 7th in the pyramid. It was such a great feat that the entire G clan felt proud of her. After all, in the thoughtless minds, only 2 people had managed to fight their way into the top 10. One was Nathan, who had been ranked first before, while the other was Lucille. After Nathan's ranking had dropped for no reason, Lucille was the only martial artist from the thoughtless minds who had entered the top 10. The G clan's patriarch was also quite happy when he saw this. He repeatedly exclaimed that the G clan finally had a worthy successor. However, at this very moment, Lucille's ranking rapidly dropped. It dropped all the way from the 7th to 700th. The master of the G clan stared fixedly at the names on the pyramid with a grim expression on his face. Someone has killed Lucille once. The master of the G clan said coldly. Unfortunately, people outside the illusion battlefield were not able to observe what was happening inside. All they could do was to wonder who had the strength to kill the ace talent of the G clan. HMPH, the person that has defeated Lucille wouldn't be a nobody. I wonder what gave the person the courage to provoke my niece. One of the elders of the G clan said with a stern voice. Big clans were usually domineering. In the G clan, Lucille was the apple of everyone's eyes. How could they tolerate someone attacking her and killing her? As I said before, we should have let Lucille merge with Lucy. One soul in two bodies would greatly reduce her strength. Why take the trouble of using such a method? Another elder said angrily. Being a duplicate of Lucille, Lucy had extraordinary power as well. The key point was that only when the two fused together could Lucille unleash her full power. Before the illusion battlefield opened, there had been a dispute among the G clan about whether or not the two should fuse with each other. There were advantages of them merging. With Lucille in her complete form, there were very few opponents in the illusion battlefield who would be able to fight against her. She even had the ability to fight against godly geniuses. But if Lucille entered the illusion battlefield with two separate forms, the speed at which she could earn illusion points would double. The only drawback was that the strength of each of her forms would be half of that of her complete form. In the end, the one who had made the decision was Lucille herself. In truth, entering the illusion battlefield with a duplicate was a big advantage for her. For instance, this time, when Lucille was killed by Zen, if she was like any other ordinary warrior, she would have lost half of her illusion points. But now, Lucille had only lost half of the illusion points of her main body. Her duplicate body, Lucy, hadn't lost anything. So in total, she had only lost a quarter of her illusion points. If Lucille was killed once when she was in her complete form, her ranking would not just fall to the 700th, it would fall directly below the 2000th. However, how many people could kill Lucille when she was in her complete form? The illusion battlefield had 50 supreme worlds, and the number of warriors that might be able to defeat Lucille was only a dozen. Moreover, these warriors might not be in the same supreme world as Lucille, which meant that the chances of her being killed were very small. Therefore, there was no definite answer to which way was better. Both had their advantages and disadvantages. Now, the elders of the G clan started to argue again about this. All right, the patriarch of the G clan, who was sitting at the highest point, waved his hand. When his voice rang out, the entire G clan became extremely quiet. Even the master of the clan and the other elders sat up straight. Lucille is doing great. Besides, being killed once doesn't matter much. I believe she will rise in her ranking once again, said the patriarch indifferently. The patriarch is right, we should have some confidence in Lucille. And maybe she wasn't even killed. Logically speaking, there should be some treasure troves in the illusion battlefield. She might have encountered some unavoidable danger there. Anyway, warriors that die in the illusion battlefield can be revived, so Lucille still has a lot of chances to rise in her ranking, the master of the G clan said calmly. Quite a number of the people present nodded their heads upon hearing this. The rankings in the early stages of the competition didn't mean anything. The name of Nathan, who had been leading the way, had already disappeared from the pyramid without a trace. Now that he was quickly catching up, everyone had to be patient with Lucille. In another corner of the illusion battlefield, a female warrior with a saber in her hand was standing at the top of the city wall with her head tilted. The appearance of this warrior was exactly the same as Lucille's. However, their auras were completely different. There were always white snowflakes floating around Lucille. This woman had snowflakes around her, too. However, these snowflakes were black in color. Although she and Lucille were two bodies of a soul, Lucy had her own mind and thoughts. Even her personality was completely different from Lucille's. The martial artists of this main city had almost escaped. After the opening of the illusion battlefield, Lucy had relied on a single saber to mercilessly slaughter the martial artists of this main city. She did not care about how many illusion points her opponents possessed or how many benefits she would reap. Every time she saw warriors outside the city, she sent them back to the main city with her single saber. After a period of time, many martial artists gathered in the main city, no longer daring to come out. But staying in the city all the time wasn't a solution. After some discussion, they decided to escape at the same time. Lucy was indeed extremely powerful, but it was impossible for her to capture all of the martial artists in one go. They just flocked out and tried their best to escape with the idea that eventually, some of them would succeed. As they ran, Lucy killed a large number of them. However, most of them managed to escape the city. So overall, the illusion points she accumulated were not as many as Lucille's. But Lucy didn't care. Even though they were two bodies of one soul, there was a primary body and a secondary body. Lucille was the primary. As the secondary, Lucy only needed to kill to her heart's content and didn't need to worry about other matters. Right now, most of the main city's martial artists had fled or scattered away. The remaining martial artists were the ones who couldn't escape, and their illusion points had already been drained by Lucy. Therefore, she was planning to go to another main city. When the martial artists in the main city saw Lucy preparing to leave, they were secretly relieved. The sooner this plague left, the better. But just before she left, Lucy discovered that her ranking had started to drop drastically. Who killed me? Lucy closed her eyes. She could connect to Lucille through telepathic communication. After a moment, Lucy had the answer to her question. A warrior called Thad Luo. If I want to find this guy, I'll probably have to cross Supreme Worlds. I'm currently unable to do it. However, with the strength this guy possesses, I'll eventually encounter him. As she thought of this, her blurry eyes lit up with a clear ray of light. In another main city, a human figure slowly emerged from a green ball of light. It was Lucille, who had been killed by Zen. She was reviving very quickly. Not long after, the ball of light broke into pieces and Lucille appeared from within. She looked in the direction of the main city's exit with a depressed look in her clear eyes. Young master, Norton and Ethan had been waiting for a long time beside the green sphere of light. Back when Norton was defeated by Zen, he had initially been unwilling to accept it. But now, after seeing that even Lucille had been defeated by that guy, he realized that there was a huge gap between him and Zen in terms of strength. Lucille gave a slight nod before walking toward the city gate. On top of the city wall, all the martial artists looked at Zen with awe in their eyes. This kid had really done it. He had killed Lucille, the ace talent of the G clan. In the eyes of these Soul Sea Realm warriors who had resigned to their fate, it was simply incomprehensible to them that a Soul Sea Realm warrior could kill Lucille. After all, Lucille was an undefeatable legend. No one in the main city could become her match, let alone kill her. And yet, Zen had done it.